My name's Eli. I'm 33, and until recently, I was the financial backbone of my entire family, and I mean the entire family. Mom, Dad, my younger brother Noah, even the utilities for the house my aunt lives in temporarily while she gets back on her feet. It started small years ago. Dad lost a client. I was doing okay, so I offered to cover the phone bill, just for now. Then it was Mom's car insurance. Then Noah's new phone. Then my aunt's electric bill. No one ever really asked. They just assumed I'd keep helping because I could. Because I was the quiet one. The responsible one. The invisible scaffolding holding up their lives, and the only time they ever noticed me was when I dared to say no. I'd like to say the downfall began slowly, but honestly, it hit me on my birthday like a sucker punch. I'd made a reservation at this cozy bistro I'd always wanted to try, nothing over the top, just a quiet dinner for close family. I booked the whole back room and paid a non-refundable deposit for 8 people. I even let the waiter know in advance that it was my birthday, hoping for a little candle on a dessert, maybe a happy birthday from someone who cared. I got there 15 minutes early, dressed in the nicest blazer I owned. I was a little nervous, even excited, as I sat alone and scrolled through old pictures on my phone. A photo popped up from my last birthday, a homemade cake I'd baked myself, with "Happy Birthday, Eli" scrawled in barely legible frosting. Noah had forgotten. I was lactose intolerant and bought an ice cream cake that year. Everyone had eaten it except me. At 6:30 p.m. sharp, I looked toward the door. Nothing. 6:45. No calls, no texts. I started getting that tight feeling in my chest, like my lungs were too small for the room. At 7 o'clock, the waiter came over, smiling politely. "Still expecting company, sir?" I gave him a tight nod. "Yeah, just running late." By 7:20, I was done pretending. I ordered the steak, medium rare, a glass of wine. I forced myself to savor it, to chew slowly and act like I wasn't alone. I paid the full $2,300 bill in silence, which included the deposit, the unused meals, and the service fee for the private room. The waiter awkwardly boxed up the untouched plates. "In case someone joins you later," he said. I nodded. No one would. As I got into my car, my phone buzzed. A Facebook notification. Aunt Renee posted a photo. I clicked it. My stomach turned. There they were, my entire family. Mom, Dad, Noah, Aunt Renee, even Cousin Jess and Uncle Mike, who never left their house without a petty excuse. The caption read, "Proud of our star." The star was Noah, smiling with a bowling trophy like he'd just solved world peace. They were at a cheap little diner 2 towns over. Someone had even brought balloons. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not angry. Not even surprised. Just hollow. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove home in complete silence. I parked in my garage, sat in the driver's seat for a while with the engine off, and let the cold creep in. Then I walked into the kitchen, made myself a cup of tea, and pulled out a little black notebook I kept in the drawer next to my bills. It had a list. A quiet, ugly list I'd started a year ago after Noah drunkenly called me our little family accountant, and everyone laughed. There were no jokes in that notebook. Just cold, hard numbers. Line by line, Dad's car insurance, Mom's phone plan, Noah's Spotify premium, Aunt Renee's electric, the gas bill I paid quarterly. I had dates, amounts, even copies of receipts. And next to each line, I had a little checkbox. Some were already marked. When I told Jess last year I wasn't renewing her gym membership, she called me selfish. That box got a checkmark. That night, I sat on the couch and stared at the blank TV screen. The light from the hallway caught the glint of the notebook's spiral binding. I grabbed my laptop. One by one, I logged into every account. No theatrics. No guilt. Just calm, methodical termination. Dad's car insurance, policy canceled. Mom's phone plan, deactivated. Number no longer in service. Family Netflix, logged out all devices. Noah's credit card that I'd co-signed, just to help his credit score, reported as compromised and removed. The utilities? I sent a notice to Aunt Renee. Account transfer required within 7 days to avoid service interruption. I didn't leave a note. Didn't text a warning. I didn't owe them a theatrical exit. I went to bed with my phone on silent and slept like a rock for the first time in months. By sunrise, I had 16 missed calls. By 10 a.m., 38. Most were from Mom. A few from Dad. One from Noah, which I only recognized because his contact photo was still that smug smirk he took at a family barbecue, holding a beer and calling himself the favorite son. I didn't listen to a single voicemail. I didn't need to. Instead, I got dressed, drove to the local park, and just sat on a bench, watching the ducks, breathing in peace, letting it settle over me like a warm blanket. At 11:15 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A text from my dad. "We need to talk. You're being childish. We're your family." I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen. For a split second, I almost replied. But then I remembered sitting alone in that restaurant while my family celebrated a participation trophy like it was a Nobel Prize. So I locked my phone. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. But that was just the first ripple. Because what I didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this notebook I kept, it held more than bills. It held receipts, evidence, and one very specific secret they'd all forgotten about. The one that would turn their little family system completely upside down. And I had every intention of using it. The notebook was more than just a list of payments. It was a paper trail. A quiet archive of every time I bailed them out, signed for them, or covered something they promised to repay. There were credit card statements in my name that Noah had used just until payday that never came. Screenshots of texts from Dad asking me to just put this month's insurance on your card because his account was locked again. Even my aunt's signature from when I'd co-signed for her to get a reduced deposit on her apartment, an apartment she hadn't paid rent on in 4 months, because she thought the landlord wouldn't evict someone with Eli on the lease. And most importantly, a business loan. A $28,000 small business loan I had co-signed with Dad 4 years ago when he wanted to restart his landscaping business. I believed in him. I really did. But after the first year, he started using the money to pay personal bills. The equipment sat in the garage gathering dust while the payments kept coming out of my bank account. They'd all forgotten. Or maybe they thought I had. They'd taken advantage of my silence, my patience, my need to avoid conflict. But what they didn't understand was that silence doesn't mean ignorance. Patience doesn't mean weakness. And conflict? Well, sometimes conflict just means consequences. It started 2 days later. That's when the electricity at Aunt Renee's apartment went out. I didn't hear it from her, no. I saw it on Facebook. She posted a furious rant about how the local utility company has no compassion and how some people are just trying to survive. The comments section was brutal. She kept replying to people that it wasn't her fault and someone was supposed to handle it. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I didn't even open the app again for the rest of the day. But I did make one more move. I opened the folder I had on my desktop titled Family Financials and scanned the PDF labeled Business Loan Agreement, Mitchell Landscaping. I scrolled to the signature section. There it was, my name, next to my father's. I'd signed the paperwork at his kitchen table, next to a cold cup of coffee, while he told me he was going to make the family proud again. He didn't. And since then, I'd made the minimum payments, kept it afloat just enough to avoid default, because I didn't want it to ruin his credit. But now, his credit score was about to get a wake-up call. I called the bank. "Hi, I need to make a change to the payment responsibility on a business loan I co-signed a few years ago." The rep was polite. Asked if I was intending to transfer ownership or default. "I'm not paying it anymore," I said calmly. "The business isn't operational. My co-signer has been unresponsive, and the funds have been used for personal expenses. I'll be sending a full fraud report." She paused. "Sir, you realize this will impact both your credit and his." I didn't even blink. "Yes, but only one of us deserves it." I hung up and drafted the email. Attached every document, every message, even screenshots of Facebook posts where Dad bragged about using the business card to pay for a new flat screen. I sent it to the fraud division. Then I exhaled, like I'd been holding my breath for 4 years and finally let it go. That same afternoon, I got a call from Mom. I didn't answer. Then a call from Noah. I didn't answer that either. At 6:04 p.m., a knock came at my door. I peeked through the peephole. Noah. I didn't open it. He knocked again, louder this time. Then I heard him mutter, "Unbelievable," and stomp away. A minute later, my phone buzzed with a text. "You're seriously doing this? Over a dinner?" And that's when it really hit me. To them, that dinner was a joke, an inconvenience. Just Eli being sensitive again. They didn't see the build-up. The 10 years of quiet sacrifice. The birthdays skipped, the promotions ignored, the loans repaid with excuses instead of money. To them, I was a bank with a doormat attached. I went back to the couch and turned on the TV, letting the quiet buzz of some random cooking show play in the background while I scrolled through the final set of files in my notebook. There was one last account. Something none of them knew I still had access to: Grandma's estate trust. Before she passed, Grandma left a modest trust fund that she split between her grandchildren. Except, I was the only one who hadn't touched mine. I let Noah dip into his for a down payment on a motorcycle. Jess used hers for a vacation. I kept mine intact. Let it grow. The trustee had called me last year and asked if I wanted to move it into my personal account, but I said no. I didn't want the family asking questions. But now? Now I had no reason to hide. I transferred the full amount, just over $38,000, into my private savings account. Not because I needed the money, but because it was the only thing left they couldn't touch. At 8:30 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a group chat, the one called Fam Squad that I never renamed. Mom texted, "Eli, we need to talk. This isn't how family treats each other." Dad texted, "You've made your point. Now undo whatever you did with the accounts. We'll talk it through like adults." Noah texted, "So what? Now you're the villain? All because nobody wanted to eat overpriced salmon on your birthday?" I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed a single sentence: "You'll understand when you're more successful." I left the group chat, blocked the numbers, turned off my phone. But even then, I wasn't done, because I had one more move planned. Something they wouldn't see coming. Something that would finally show them what it really meant to lose the person they thought they could walk all over. And I already had the envelope sealed and ready. The envelope was heavy, not in weight, but in meaning. It had sat in the drawer of my desk for almost 6 months, untouched, waiting. I hadn't planned to use it like this, not originally. It was something I drafted after a particularly brutal holiday visit, when Dad casually dropped that real men don't need thank yous after I paid for Christmas dinner and gifts for everyone's kids. I remember standing in my apartment afterward, just staring at my fridge, the silence almost deafening. That night, I wrote the letter. I didn't mail it. I didn't even seal it. But I kept it, just in case. Now, though, it was sealed. And it wasn't going in the mailbox. It was going to Dad in person. The next morning, I drove to his house. Their house. The house I grew up in. It was a tidy 2-story with the same peeling mailbox that Dad had promised to replace since 2014. The porch light still flickered, like it always did when someone stepped on the 3rd stair. And the lawn? Overgrown. His landscaping business clearly wasn't even taking care of his own front yard. I didn't go to the door. I placed the envelope between the screen and the front door, right next to the stack of unopened mail they never bothered to collect. Then I got back in my car, pulled around the corner, and parked. I wanted to see who picked it up. At 9:17 a.m., the envelope sat on my desk, untouched for weeks. Not because I was hesitant, but because timing mattered. And I wanted this to land with the weight of every year I'd spent being their safety net, their invisible backup plan, their go-to-fixer when their poor choices caught up to them. This wasn't just a reaction to a missed dinner. This was the final chapter of a pattern that had been writing itself for a decade. I had been planning this part long before my birthday, long before the steak went cold in front of me while they posed with Noah's bowling trophy like he'd cured cancer. I didn't just wake up one day and decide to cut them off. I had watched them make choice after choice that left me footing the bill, not just financially, but emotionally, mentally, sometimes even physically. I kept that envelope in plain sight, right next to my laptop. A reminder that I had power now, not just leverage, but clarity and peace. Because what was inside that envelope wasn't a bombshell. It was a mirror, a truth they couldn't escape from once it was in their hands. I'll get to what was inside soon. But first, Noah. He didn't take the silence well. Neither did Dad or Aunt Renee, but Noah was the one who escalated things. He started texting me from random numbers, calling from burner apps. "You're ruining everything," one of the messages read. "We're family. Family forgives." Another one, "You're not better than us just because you got some fancy job and a chip on your shoulder." That one made me laugh out loud. A chip on my shoulder? I had a ledger on my shoulder. At one point, he sent a long paragraph about how he was going through a hard time and that I needed to be the bigger person. Then the kicker: "You owe us." Owe them. That word made something in my chest turn to ice. I owed them? After the rent I paid for my parents when Dad was between jobs for 2 years? After the credit card I opened just so Noah could rent a car for spring break and he forgot to pay it off? After the groceries, the holidays, the school books for my cousin that I paid for when Aunt Renee said, "You're doing well, right?" and smiled like it was charming? I owed them? I didn't respond. I just updated the notes in my folder. Meanwhile, I started getting messages from extended family, cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Hey man, heard there's some drama. Just wanted to say we love you. Polite, careful, neutral. One even tried to probe. Your mom's been really upset. I think she misses you. I replied, she missed my birthday too. I guess we're even. The guilt attempts didn't stop there. Mom left a voicemail one night, just after 11 p.m. Her voice was thick with emotion, like she was holding back tears. Eli, sweetheart. I don't know what happened. I thought we were fine. If this is about the dinner, it was just bad timing. Noah had his celebration already planned and, well, your father didn't know you'd made reservations. We didn't mean to hurt you. Please call me. She sounded fragile, like someone trying to reach through glass. I sat there listening in the dark, the streetlight outside casting a pale glow through the window. I thought about the number of times I'd left her similar messages on birthdays, on holidays, on days when I just wanted to feel like I mattered. She never called back. But now that she needed me, suddenly I was worth a voicemail. I didn't delete it, but I didn't respond either. And the next day, I mailed the envelope. Certified, return receipt requested. Not emailed, not scanned. Mailed, because I wanted them to hold it, to open it, to read every page in their hands, not on a screen they could swipe away from. Inside was a packet of documents, neatly organized, labeled, 3-hole punched. I'd made copies for myself and stored the originals in a safety deposit box weeks ago. The first page was a typed letter. To whom it may concern, this is a formal notification that I, Elijah Mitchell, will no longer be financially supporting or co-signing for any debts, expenses, or obligations pertaining to the following individuals: Mitchell Sr., father; Carol Mitchell, mother; Noah Mitchell, brother; and Renee Clark, aunt. Please find enclosed documentation of payments, account closures, co-sign withdrawals, and transferred liabilities. Any further attempts to contact me regarding these matters will be ignored or forwarded to my attorney. Beneath the letter were spreadsheets, charts, bank records, text messages with dates and dollar amounts, highlighted lines showing recurring transfers from my accounts to theirs, the terms of the business loan, the $7,200 I'd paid toward it, screenshots from the landscaping company's Facebook page, inactive since 2019. But the real bombshell was in the final section, the estate addendum from Grandma's trust fund. I had included an affidavit from the trustee. It stated that Noah had accessed his portion of the trust 2 years before he was legally permitted to, and that he'd falsified an employment verification form to do so, an action that would legally bar him from ever receiving any remaining disbursements or family-held financial assistance connected to the estate. Why did I include it? Because Mom and Dad had promised to even it out by giving him part of mine when I got older. They'd even told me not to touch it yet, so the family could plan it fairly. I smiled when I read those old texts again. Then I printed them and stapled them to the affidavit. Let them try to spin it now. I got the delivery confirmation 3 days later. Then the silence began. Not a single call, not a voicemail, no texts, no burner numbers, no subtweets, no Facebook shade, just silence. And that silence? It was louder than any apology they could have sent. Because silence meant they'd finally read it. But I wasn't done watching the fallout. Because in 2 weeks, the bank was going to report the business loan as delinquent. And when they did, Dad's credit, already fragile, was going to crater. And when that happened, the new truck he was trying to lease in his name, that deal would fall through. And I already knew what day the rejection letter would arrive. It arrived on a Tuesday. I knew this because I'd called the dealership 2 weeks earlier, anonymously, and asked if they required a hard credit pull before finalizing lease paperwork. They did. I also knew Dad had applied for the truck on a Saturday, thinking the business loan wouldn't reflect until after the credit cycle reset. That was his mistake. His other mistake? Still thinking I was the same quiet doormat of a son who'd just keep paying and forgiving while being treated like the family's unpaid intern. I got the first message from a number I didn't recognize. They declined it. You know why? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That silence had power now. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scrambling to fix things or soften the blow. I was just letting it all burn. Not out of spite, but out of long, overdue necessity. The next day, I stopped by my local coffee shop. As I was sipping a latte and scrolling emails, I got an alert from an old shared Google Drive folder, one I hadn't touched in years. It was titled Mitchell Family Projects. I almost deleted the notification, assuming it was some forgotten doc. But when I opened it, I saw a new file, Eli, please read. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was a letter. From Dad. Typed. Rambling. Overly formal in some places and oddly familiar in others. A patchwork of excuses, guilt-tripping, half apologies, and not-so-subtle manipulations. I know we haven't always appreciated you the way we should have, but you know how this family works. We survive by sticking together. Sometimes we drop the ball. We've all made mistakes. I don't think it's fair to punish everyone for something as small as a dinner. He called my act of cutting ties an overreaction. He referred to the money I'd spent as contributions. He even tried to pivot the narrative. Noah has been struggling. You're the big brother. If you turn your back on him now, how is that any different than what you say we've done to you? That line made me laugh. How is it different? Because I never laughed in his face while he ate alone on his birthday. I never posted family photos behind his back. I never took his sacrifices and repackaged them as expectations. That's how it was different. And then came the line that told me everything I needed to know about how little he'd changed. You made your point. Now come back. Come back. As if I'd simply taken a dramatic vacation from being their personal ATM. As if this whole thing was just a tantrum. As if they could just hit reset and things would go back to normal. That word, normal, was poison. Because for them, normal was me covering bills, showing up to family events alone, being the butt of their passive-aggressive jokes, and hearing you wouldn't understand every time I questioned why they treated Noah like royalty. Normal was me last. But I wasn't going back to that. Ever. I closed the letter, deleted the document, and sent one final email from a burner account with no name. Message received. No further contact necessary. Take care. And that was it. I blocked the folder, removed access, deleted the shared drive permanently. I spent the next few weeks doing something I hadn't done in years, building my life. I took a weekend trip to the coast, alone, intentionally. I ate seafood at a beachside restaurant and toasted a glass of wine to no one in particular. I started seeing a therapist too, not because I felt broken, but because I wanted to understand why I'd let it go on for so long. Why I'd been the human band-aid for a family that never stopped bleeding me dry. I didn't need closure from them. I needed clarity for myself. And with every day that passed without another guilt text, another phone call, another sarcastic comment disguised as a joke, I felt lighter, freer, more alive than I had in a decade. One afternoon, about a month later, I got coffee with an old friend from college, Mark. We hadn't spoken in a couple years. He'd heard about the situation through mutual friends. After some polite catch-up, he looked at me across the table and asked, "So what now? Are you done with them for good?" I took a slow sip of coffee before answering. "Yeah," I said. "I am." He nodded. "Feels weird, doesn't it?" "It does," I admitted. "But it also feels clean. Because that's what cutting ties felt like. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just clean. Like I had finally scrubbed the guilt and obligation off my skin and stepped into something new, something quieter, more honest, and entirely mine. And no, they didn't fade away quietly. Of course not. I heard through the grapevine that Noah tried applying for a small loan and got rejected. His landlord apparently called my old number because he'd listed me as an emergency contact. I'd already disconnected that line. Aunt Renee was shocked when her gas got shut off for non-payment. She posted a GoFundMe asking for support during this difficult time, and the only donation was from a high school friend who sent $5 and a comment that read, "Actions have consequences." Mom eventually stopped trying to call, but I heard she told one of her coworkers that Eli's just going through a selfish phase. That stung a little, but not for long, because deep down, I knew I hadn't changed. I just stopped hiding who I really was. I'd stopped being their plan B, stopped being their backup wallet, stopped being the emotional punching bag for a family that never bothered to check if I was okay. Now I was just Eli. Not the responsible one. Not the dependable one. Not the fixer. Just a man with boundaries. With peace. With freedom. And the day I stopped funding their lives? That was the day I finally started living my own. My name is Ryan. I'm 28, and I used to think family meant unconditional support. The kind that doesn't tally every dollar or compare achievements like trophies on a shelf. But if you asked my mother, she'd tell you that family is all about balance. Her favorite word whenever I questioned why I was always the one covering bills, repairing things around the house, or funding whatever new crisis my parents suddenly couldn't afford. "It all balances out," she'd say, as if I hadn't noticed that my side of the scale was buried under a pile of overdue notices and Venmo requests. The final straw didn't come with a bang. It wasn't some explosive argument or betrayal I couldn't forgive. No, it came with lukewarm leftovers in a cracked plastic container and a sentence so casual, so smug, that I didn't even react right away. "Your sister deserved the bonus. She's the successful one," my mom said, standing over the kitchen sink like she had just finished blessing me with her wisdom. She tossed a fork into the drying rack and handed me the container like a prize for participation. "Take this home. It's the chicken from Thursday." That bonus she was talking about was my annual work bonus. The same one that had quietly gone into their joint rent account last year to help out just this once. I never made a scene, never asked for it back, never mentioned that I had to delay my car repairs to make it work. So when I overheard my sister bragging a week earlier about the surprise weekend girls trip our mom gifted her, right after my bonus had hit my account, I just kept my mouth shut and connected the dots. My sister, Ava, is 26, recently graduated with her master's, and to hear my mom talk about her, you'd think she invented oxygen. Ava was the golden child, photogenic, articulate, brilliant at every school presentation, and an absolute disaster with money. But no matter what financial mess she found herself in, Mom and Dad always had a reason to bail her out. Credit card maxed? She's building credit. Parking tickets stacking up? The city's unfair. Lost her job again. It's the economy, not her. Meanwhile, I've held the same job for 6 years. Paid my way through college, never missed a payment on anything, and still somehow found myself treated like the family debit card with a heartbeat. They didn't even ask anymore. They expected. I sat at the kitchen table that evening, the container of leftovers sweating condensation onto the wooden surface. Mom was humming to herself, wiping down the counter like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just made it abundantly clear that Ava was the real prize, and I was just the guy you call when the electric bill's late. "So," she added, without even looking at me, "I told the landlord the rent would be late this month, but we'll have it by Friday, okay? Ava's still waiting on that freelancing check." I blinked. "What?" She turned and smiled like I'd just asked her if water was wet. "The rent, honey. You usually take care of it by the 3rd, right? It's just a couple days. Ava's trying, you know. She needs a little grace." Something inside me folded in on itself. I didn't yell. I didn't even argue. I just nodded once and stood up, carrying the food container like it was something delicate. "Then she can handle your rent too," I said quietly. Mom paused mid-wipe. "What do you mean?" I smiled politely. Exactly what it sounds like. That night, I opened my laptop, logged into every account I had access to, and started making changes. The rent account I'd been topping off each month? Gone. Auto payments for utilities in their names? Canceled. Grocery budget transfer? Stopped. I even pulled back the emergency savings I'd set up under my own name for them, the one they never asked about but always seemed to know existed. They didn't notice immediately. Mom texted me 2 days later. "Can you send the rent early this time? Ava's got a lot on her plate." I didn't reply. That Friday, I got a voicemail from my dad, who rarely called unless it was about handling something important. His voice was tight, clipped. "Hey, the landlord stopped by. Said the rent bounced. Thought you were taking care of it? Call me." Still, I said nothing. The next day, I got a group text, one of those desperate family blasts when something's gone wrong. "Ryan, can you please explain what's going on with the rent? We don't understand why it didn't go through." I just stared at it for a while. I thought about replying, typing out everything I'd kept bottled up, the months of quiet resentment, the favoritism, the expectation that I'd carry everyone while being treated like I didn't matter. But I didn't want a debate. I didn't want apologies that would only last until the next time they needed something. I wanted silence. Instead, I muted the group chat. Then I went out and bought myself the noise-canceling headphones I'd been putting off for months. It wasn't until Monday evening that the full fallout hit. I was in the middle of a meeting when I noticed my phone vibrating nonstop. 6 missed calls from Mom, 3 from Dad, 1 from Ava, then a text from the landlord himself. "Your parents said you handle the rent. Just need clarification before we proceed with next steps." That one I responded to. I kept it simple. "I don't pay for that unit anymore. Please contact the listed tenants directly. Thanks." Apparently, next steps meant a notice taped to the front door, because that night I got a blurry photo from Ava. Her message just said, "What the hell is this?" Still, I said nothing. The calls kept coming. Mom left a voicemail where she sounded more confused than angry. Sweetheart, what's going on? You can't just stop helping. We had a system. Yeah, a system where I was the ATM and they were the entitled customers, tapping the screen harder when the funds didn't come fast enough. By Wednesday, the messages changed tone. Less confusion, more panic. Ava messaged me directly. You're ruining everything. If we get evicted, it's on you. That made me laugh. Actually laugh, sitting alone at my kitchen table, reheating the same chicken leftovers they handed me like a prize for being the family mule. And then Thursday came. That's when I saw it. My dad, pacing in the front yard of their duplex, talking to the landlord. My mom came out in her robe, holding her phone up to her ear, scanning the street. Probably hoping to catch me walking by, like this was just some sitcom misunderstanding that could be fixed with a hug and a fresh guilt trip. I stayed in my car across the street, watching from behind tinted windows. I wasn't hiding. I just didn't feel like being dragged back into a play I didn't audition for. That's when Ava walked out, barefoot, holding a notice in her hand, one with bright red lettering that even from across the street looked damning. I didn't get out. I didn't wave. I didn't even start the engine. I just watched as Ava threw the paper down and started yelling, pointing at Mom, who started yelling right back. My dad tried to calm them down, but you could tell it wasn't working. The system had crashed. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel responsible. I just sat there, quiet, still, and let the chaos unfold without me. By the following Monday, the silence was eerie. No more frantic texts, no new voicemails, not even a passive-aggressive meme from Ava. I knew my family well enough to realize it wasn't because they'd calmed down. It was strategy. They were regrouping. And sure enough, that evening, my mom called from a different number. She used my aunt's phone, clearly hoping I'd pick up. I didn't, but I let the voicemail play out, and this time, the guilt was dripping through every word like syrup. Hi, honey. I just wanted to talk. This has all gone too far. We're family. Family doesn't give up on each other. Your sister is going through a really hard time, and I'm just doing my best to keep everyone together. I know you've been feeling unappreciated lately, and I'm sorry if anything I said made you feel like you didn't matter. But this isn't the way to handle it. Just call me back, okay? I played it twice. Once with frustration. The second time with pity. Because that was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get from her. And I'm sorry if sandwiched in between excuses and veiled manipulation. But she was wrong about one thing. I hadn't given up on my family. They just never really let me be part of it. Not unless it involved opening my wallet or fixing something Ava broke. Growing up, there was this unspoken rule in our house. Ava was the heart, and I was the hands. She got the praise, the photo albums, the spotlight. I got the chores, the errands, and the quiet lectures about being responsible because I was more mature. But being mature in our family didn't mean being respected. It meant being used. I had stayed silent for years, brushing it off as just how things are. But something about that line, she's the successful one, stuck to my ribs like a bad meal. It wasn't just favoritism. It was a confirmation of what I'd always suspected, that no matter what I did, how stable or kind or present I was, I'd always be the spare tire, the backup plan, the one they leaned on while pretending I didn't exist. Tuesday morning, I got a message from Ava. Just one sentence. You made your point. I thought about replying, but what would I say? That I didn't do it to prove anything? That I just wanted peace? That the second I stopped enabling them, they called it cruelty? Instead, I did something small but meaningful to me. I transferred the money I would have spent on their rent into a travel fund I'd been too guilty to touch for years. I'd always dreamed of going somewhere alone, somewhere quiet, with fresh air and no drama, but every time I got close, someone needed help. Someone needed just this one thing. I was done putting my life on hold for people who saw me as a walking emergency fund. That Friday, I heard through a mutual friend, our cousin Tyler, who somehow managed to stay neutral in the family war, that the eviction had gone through. My parents had 30 days. Ava had already left to stay with a friend in the city. Apparently, she screamed something like, "Don't call me when your lights get shut off," before storming out with her ring light and 2 suitcases. I pictured Mom crying to the landlord, Dad sighing about how kids these days have no loyalty, and a single part of me, a small one, wanted to cave, to fix it again, to swoop in and pretend the damage wasn't permanent. But then I remembered the look on my mom's face when she handed me those leftovers. That smug little smirk. That quiet dismissal. She's the successful one. I booked a trip that night, a week-long getaway to Iceland, of all places. It was something I'd saved on Pinterest years ago, back when I still believed I'd eventually have the time and space for myself. I finally did. I left the next weekend. I didn't tell anyone. I just packed, left a note for my apartment manager, and got on the plane. I can't describe the feeling of standing alone near a waterfall, watching the mist rise and knowing that, for once, no one could reach me. No emergencies. No guilt. No Ava. Just me, the cold wind, and the quiet. When I landed back home, my voicemail was full again. My mom had called 13 times. Dad, 6. Ava, just once. I didn't listen to any of them. I just deleted everything and made dinner in peace. It took 3 more weeks before the calls slowed down. According to Tyler, my parents moved into a smaller place, not terrible, but not their home. The new landlord wasn't as forgiving. Ava, on the other hand, was apparently focusing on herself and trying to start a YouTube channel. That was her 6th new chapter since college. I never confronted them, never gave a big speech. I didn't need to. But a few weeks later, Mom sent me one final message. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even manipulative. It was just a photo of the old house. The porch empty, the curtains gone. Below it, she wrote, "We're out. I hope you're happy." I stared at it for a long time. Then I closed the photo, turned off my phone, and went for a walk. No music. No notifications. It had been nearly 2 months since the eviction when I finally saw my mom in person again. I didn't plan it. I was at a small cafe downtown, one I like to work from on Fridays, tucked between a florist and a secondhand bookstore. It was quiet, cozy, and most importantly, not the kind of place anyone from my family ever visited. Or so I thought. I was halfway through answering emails when I looked up and saw her. She looked older. Not in the dramatic, gaunt sort of way you see in movies, but worn down. Her hair wasn't done like it usually was, no makeup, no jewelry. Just a thick gray cardigan over one of those faded t-shirts she used to clean in. Her eyes scanned the room like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be there. Then they landed on me. She didn't smile. She just walked over slowly, clutching her purse in both hands like she was afraid it might fall apart. I didn't stand. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, voice small. I blinked, quietly closed my laptop, and leaned back in my chair. "Did you come here on purpose?" She shook her head. "No, I didn't know. I just came in. Then I saw you." I looked at her for a moment, waiting for the pitch, waiting for the real reason. She sat down without asking. For a full minute, we said nothing. Just the occasional clink of coffee cups from the barista behind us and the low hum of someone's jazz playlist playing overhead. Finally, she broke the silence. "We're staying with Uncle David right now, just until we figure things out." I nodded. "Okay. It's hard. Your father's been applying to some delivery jobs, but his back's acting up again. Ava doesn't really talk to us much. Not since," she stopped herself, then looked at me. "Not since everything." Another pause. Then she added, "I miss when things weren't like this." I felt that old familiar tug, that instinct to reach across the table, to fix, to explain, to soften everything like I'd always done. But this time, I let it pass. I sipped my coffee. "When was that? When things weren't like this?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" I said carefully. "When exactly were things not like this?" "When I was 16 and working 2 shifts on weekends while Ava borrowed money from your purse and skipped class. Or when I paid your rent 3 months in a row without a thank you, and you bought her that new tablet the same week." Her face went blank for a second. I watched it happen, the moment she realized I hadn't just snapped recently, that this had been building for years. "I didn't mean to make you feel invisible," she said quietly. I thought you didn't need as much. You were always so capable. You didn't complain. That's not the same thing as being okay." She nodded, then looked away. "I know." We sat in silence again. This time, it wasn't angry. It wasn't tense. It was just tired. Eventually, she pulled something out of her bag, a small envelope. It looked wrinkled, like it had been carried around for a while. She slid it across the table. "What's this?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately. "It's not money. We don't have any right now. It's just a letter. I wrote it when we first got to David's. Didn't know if I'd ever give it to you." I didn't open it. I just nodded, placed it next to my cup, and leaned back. She stood up slowly. "You probably don't want to hear this right now, but I really am proud of you, Ryan. I just wish I had shown it when it mattered." I didn't respond. She took a few steps away, then stopped. "You were always the strongest of us. I'm sorry we mistook that for invincibility." Then she left. I sat there for a while, just staring at the envelope. I didn't open it right away. I wasn't ready. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I ever would be. But I didn't throw it away, either. I finished my coffee, reopened my laptop, got back to work. Life didn't suddenly click into place. I wasn't magically healed or free from the tangled mess that is family history. But something had shifted. The guilt was quieter. The air was clearer. And for once, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. I didn't open the letter that day. In fact, it sat on my desk for nearly a week, untouched. I'd glance at it between tasks, sometimes pick it up, turn it over, but never unfold it. Not because I was afraid of what it said, but because I already knew what it would say. Apologies dressed in nostalgia. Justifications wrapped in family history. Maybe even a guilt trip or two pretending to be compliments. It was always the same song, just played in a different key. But one night, I finally read it. After a long day of work, I made dinner, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat down in the soft glow of my desk lamp. There was something anticlimactic about it, opening an envelope I already expected to disappoint me. Still, I owed it to myself to be sure. It began the way most of my mom's letters used to, trying too hard to sound casual. Hey, sweetheart. I know this is probably a surprise. I've been thinking about what to say, and I keep rewriting it in my head, so I figured I'd just write and see what comes out. She talked about the past, about when I was a kid, how I used to sit at the kitchen table and organize my toys by color, how I took things apart just to put them back together, how Ava would beg to borrow my homework, and I'd let her, not because I was scared, but because I hated watching her cry when she got bad grades. She called me the calm in the storm. That one made me pause. Then she veered into regret. I don't know when I started treating you like a safety net instead of a son. I think it was little by little, so small I didn't notice until the net was gone and we were falling. I wish I had told you how proud I was, how grateful I was, but I didn't. And I'm sorry. I sat back in my chair, letting those words settle. I was expecting something manipulative, maybe even bitter. But this felt different. Still imperfect, still late, but different. The letter ended with something simple. If you don't want to talk to us again, I'll understand. But I hope you'll at least believe this. You were never invisible. We just didn't look hard enough. I'm sorry. I love you. No demands. No, we're family, so you owe us. Just an apology. One I didn't know I needed, but one I had wanted for so long. I forgot I still did. Still, a letter doesn't erase years of imbalance. It doesn't change the fact that I lost parts of my 20s helping people who never really helped me. It doesn't fix the fact that Ava, who never once called to ask how I was doing, only ever reached out to demand or accuse. But it was a start. A few weeks after I read the letter, I got a call from my cousin Tyler again. He was always the unofficial messenger, the Switzerland of our dysfunctional family. He didn't pick sides, but he kept receipts. Hey, just a heads up, he said. Ava's moving back into town. She's staying with a friend, but says she wants to make things right. She asked if I'd talk to you. I told her that's between you two. I sighed. Thanks for the warning. Also, he added, your mom and dad moved into a senior living apartment. Nothing fancy, but stable. It was the first time I'd heard them described as stable in years. That weekend, I stopped by their new place. I didn't call first. I wasn't ready for some grand emotional reunion. I just wanted to see it. Make sure they were okay. See if the apology held any weight in real life. When I knocked, my dad answered. He looked surprised. Not overwhelmed. Not angry. Just surprised. Ryan, he said. You're here. I nodded. Can I come in? He stepped aside without a word. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, a modest kitchen, and an old couch that sagged a little in the middle. But it was clean. Lived in. Quiet. My mom was sitting in a recliner, reading. When she saw me, she didn't rush over. She didn't cry. She just set her book down and said, Hi. Hi, I replied. We didn't hug. We didn't have some dramatic, TV-style heart-to-heart. We just talked. About little things. How their new neighbors were nice. How dad had started doing crossword puzzles. How mom had learned to budget better because when you lose the golden goose, you learn to live like a chicken. That made me chuckle. We didn't talk about Ava. Not that time. It felt too heavy. But the air between us was different now. Not fixed, but no longer strained to the point of snapping. There was room for something new. And so, I visited a second time. Then a third. Once, I even brought groceries. Not because they asked, but because I wanted to. There's a difference. A choice. Eventually, Ava called. I didn't answer. I let her go to voicemail, like she had done so many times when I needed help moving or needed someone to talk to after a rough week. Her message wasn't angry, just fake sweet. Hey, big bro. Just checking in. We should totally catch up. I've been working on myself a lot lately. Let me know when you're free. I wasn't. I didn't call back. That's the thing. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean returning to the same place and pretending it's a fresh start. Sometimes, it means building something entirely new and choosing who's allowed to visit. Over the next few months, my parents never asked for money, never implied I owed them. They started to understand boundaries, real ones. We still weren't close in the way some families are, but there was a peace to it now, and I was no longer drowning under expectations. I used that travel fund I'd started to take a solo trip every year. Iceland first, then Portugal, then Kyoto, places I had always dreamed of, but never felt allowed to explore. I started taking photos again, something I'd given up when life got too heavy. Eventually, I sold a few prints, even opened an online shop. Nothing massive, just mine. As for Ava, she kept her distance. She sent a few texts every now and then. Once she wrote, "I get it. You're done. But I hope one day you won't be." I didn't reply. Some doors don't need to be slammed. They just stay closed. One afternoon, a year after everything blew up, I sat with my mom at that same little cafe, the one where she found me by accident. We were sipping coffee, watching the rain, when she said quietly, "You know, I used to think your sister was the one who'd take care of us when we got old." I didn't respond right away. "But you were always the one holding everything together," she continued. "I just didn't realize it until I dropped everything on you." I glanced at her. "I wasn't the glue, Mom. I was the tape. Temporary. Replaceable." She nodded slowly. "Not anymore." And that was it. No tears. No promises. Just truth. It took nearly 3 decades, but I finally learned the difference between helping and enabling, between love and obligation, between family and burden. And in the end, I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped carrying them. Christmas morning is supposed to feel warm, right? Like cinnamon and pine needles and the quiet hum of family togetherness. But for me, Christmas has started feeling more like frostbite, cold, creeping, and impossible to ignore. I'm 36 now, and I've spent most of my adult life pretending that being excluded didn't sting, that family ties weren't supposed to strangle. But this year broke something. Or maybe it revealed something that was already broken long ago. My name's Riley. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings, me, then my sister Tessa, 33, and our younger brother Sean, 29. Growing up, I was the quiet one. Not shy, exactly, but always the one expected to understand. When Tessa threw tantrums, I was told to be patient. When Sean failed a class or crashed Dad's car, I was told, "Don't be too hard on him. Riley, he's still figuring things out." That was the soundtrack of my childhood. You're the responsible one. You're the easy one. You're the one we don't have to worry about. At some point, that stopped feeling like a compliment and started sounding like a dismissal. I left home at 18 for college and never really moved back. I worked hard, built my own tech company, and, after nearly burning out by 30, sold it for more money than I'll probably ever need. I kept my success quiet, though. No big announcements, no Lamborghini in the driveway. That's never been me. I still drive a 10-year-old Subaru, wear clothes until they fade, and never once mentioned to my family that I'm technically a multimillionaire. Not because I wanted to test them or anything dramatic like that, but because I knew, deep down, that money would change the way they saw me. And not in a good way. Tessa, on the other hand, has always been about optics. She lives for Instagram stories of candid family brunches where everyone's mysteriously wearing coordinated outfits. She documents her life like she's pitching a Hallmark movie, all carefully curated smiles and seasonal throw pillows. She's married to Mark, who is just as obsessed with appearances, and they have 2 kids, Ashton, 6, and Everly, 4. Tessa calls them her miracles and insists the rest of us refer to them as the littles, which honestly makes my skin crawl a little every time. Sean floats. That's the best way I can describe him. One month he's selling real estate. The next he's doing landscape design. The next he's launching a podcast about mindful masculinity that disappears after 3 episodes. He's always had charm, though. That easy, disarming way of making everyone feel like they're the most important person in the room. It worked on my parents, Still does, if we're being honest. Our parents, Joyce and Daniel, are, well, complicated. My mom's the kind of woman who calls herself brutally honest when she's really just rude. My dad's quieter, but no less passive-aggressive. They mean well, or at least, they convince themselves they do. But over the years, their accidental slights started to feel pretty intentional. Like when they forgot to tell me about Sean's engagement party, then insisted they thought I wouldn't be able to make it anyway. Or when I gifted them a trip to Napa for their anniversary, and they spent the entire time posting photos captioned, "Thanks to our wonderful Tessa for organizing this," as if I didn't exist. But this Christmas was different. I'd been living in Seattle for the past 5 years, but I bought a cabin just outside Denver last summer. A place with big windows, a roaring fireplace, and enough room for everyone to gather comfortably. I thought, maybe foolishly, that it could be the start of something new, a fresh tradition. I offered it to the family as a potential Christmas spot back in September. I even emailed pictures. No one responded. Then in November, Mom casually mentioned that Tessa's offered to host this year. It just makes more sense with the kids. I nodded, told her I understood. But deep down, something cracked. I had offered to host. I had already decorated the damn cabin. I had blocked off the entire week in my calendar. But once again, my gesture was treated like an afterthought. Still, I told myself it was fine. That I could spend Christmas on my own, maybe invite a few friends over, go snowshoeing, start a new tradition. I try not to take it personally. I even shipped gifts to Tessa's house for the kids, wrapped, labeled, no drama, just so they'd know I hadn't disappeared. And then Christmas morning came. I was drinking coffee in front of the fire, watching the snow drift down outside my window, when my phone buzzed with a notification. Tessa had tagged me in a photo on Instagram. The caption read, "Christmas morning with the whole fam. So blessed." I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. There they were. My parents, Tessa, Mark, Sean, the kids, even my Aunt Marlene, who I hadn't seen in years, sitting around a massive fireplace I knew far too well. Because it was mine. They were in my cabin. Every single one of them. I hadn't given them the code. I hadn't even told them I wouldn't be there. I never said it was available. But somehow, they had let themselves in, made themselves at home, and then posted about it like it was a normal family gathering. I zoomed in on the photo. My throw pillows. My rug. The mug in my dad's hand had a chip on the rim from where I dropped it last month. This wasn't a coincidence. This was deliberate. The rage came slowly, like a pot coming to a boil. First disbelief, then humiliation, then something deeper, betrayal. I scrolled through the rest of Tessa's post. Dozens of photos. The kids opening gifts under my tree, Mom and Tessa baking cookies in my kitchen, Sean making a cheers gesture with one of my limited edition whiskey glasses. Not one text. Not one call. Not a single mention that they were using my space. I almost threw my phone across the room. Instead, I took a breath, opened the comments, and typed, "Love this. Just FYI, the cabin you're in? I own it. Tenants move in January 3rd. Then I hit send. 3 minutes later, the post vanished. The silence that followed was deafening. And then my phone started buzzing. 61 calls in the span of an hour. 14 voicemails. All from my parents, Tessa, Sean, even Mark. Texts rolled in like hailstones. "Riley, can we talk? Why would you do that? Don't ruin this for the kids." It was just a misunderstanding. But was it? I stood in that quiet cabin, staring at the fire as my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt awake. And that was the moment I decided I wasn't letting this go. Not this time. For the first few hours, I ignored the calls. I turned my phone face down, let the buzzing become background noise, and tried to calm the storm building in my chest. But when the voicemails started piling up, 14 by the end of the day, I knew I had to listen. Not because I wanted to make peace, but because I needed to know just how deep the betrayal ran. The first one was from my mom. Voice syrupy sweet, but laced with that edge I knew too well. "Riley, honey, I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. We thought you weren't coming, and Tessa said it'd be fine to use the cabin. You never said you were using it, and it's not like we trashed anything. Please don't overreact. Call me." The second was my dad, his voice low and stiff. "Riley, this isn't the way to handle things. Family talks these things through. Don't make this about ownership. Call us back." Then came Tessa. "Oh my God, Riley, seriously? You're really going to put tenants in the cabin over Christmas? Without warning? You blindsided us. Everyone's upset, especially the kids. Ashton cried. Everly asked why Uncle Riley was being mean. I don't know what's gotten into you, but this is so selfish. That one almost made me laugh. I was being selfish? For reclaiming my own space? After they snuck into it, hosted a party, and plastered it across social media like it was some family fairy tale I'd been too cold-hearted to join? Sean's voicemail was short. Bro, I don't know what the hell that comment was about, but you need to chill. You weren't even coming. Nobody thought you cared. Don't burn bridges over this, man. It's Christmas. That voicemail was when the simmer turned into a boil. I'd been chill my entire life, letting things slide, swallowing the hurt, laughing off slights like they were just quirks of family. But this wasn't an oversight. This wasn't a scheduling mix-up. This was my entire family deciding I didn't matter. Not enough to invite. Not enough to ask. Not even enough to inform. And then they call me selfish. I didn't respond that day. Or the next. I packed up a few things and drove back to Seattle 2 days early. When I arrived, there was a large envelope waiting in my mailbox, certified mail, from a real estate agency. Confused, I opened it. It was a lease agreement. For the cabin. Signed. By Tessa. The tenant name had been filled out. Tessa Reynolds. Lease term, 1 year. Start date, December 15th. My hands started shaking. Attached was a note from the leasing agent. Thank you for finalizing this. We received the signed lease and key copies from your sister last week. We're excited to move forward with the property management partnership. Please let us know when you'd like the direct deposit info for rental income. Rental income? Partnership? I stared at the documents for a long time, mind reeling. Tessa had posed as me. She had contacted the agency I'd mentioned casually months ago when I was exploring whether I should rent the cabin during ski season. She had given them the access code, had keys made, and even filled out paperwork in my name. The lease was technically void, since it didn't have my signature, but the boldness of it stunned me. She'd planned this. The whole family gathering at my cabin wasn't a spontaneous Christmas miracle. It was orchestrated, and they'd never planned to tell me. I drove straight to my lawyer's office the next morning. Rebecca's been my real estate attorney for years, calm, no nonsense, and fiercely competent. When I showed her the lease, she whistled softly. This is borderline fraud, she said, flipping through the pages. Definitely impersonation. She's lucky the agency didn't wire funds yet, or she'd be in even deeper. I didn't even know what to say. I just sat there, gripping the edge of the chair like the ground was shifting beneath me. Rebecca leaned forward. Riley, I know this is family, but you need to decide how far you're willing to go. We can stop this, but it might get ugly. Ugly. That word echoed in my head all day. Because things were already ugly. They had been for years. This was just the first time I couldn't pretend otherwise. I didn't call my sister. I didn't confront her. I wanted to hear it from her lips. I wanted to see if she'd lie to my face. So when Mom called again, her fourth call that day, I picked up. Hi, I said flatly. Oh, honey, she breathed, like we were on the brink of reconciliation. I'm so glad you answered. I've been worried sick. Really? I asked. Because it seems like you've all been having a great time. There was a pause. It wasn't personal, Riley. You're always so busy. And Tessa she had this whole thing planned. Planned, I said, voice tightening. So you knew it was my cabin? Another pause. Well, yes. But she said you weren't using it. And she thought it would be nice for everyone. She also signed a lease, I said. Silence. She what? My mom whispered. She submitted a forged lease to a rental agency, I said, forcing calm into my voice. Using my name. My address. She gave them keys. Codes. Access to a property I own. That can't be right, Mom said. Tessa wouldn't. She did. More silence. Then, well, maybe she thought you'd changed your mind. You never said you'd be using it. I never said you could use it, I snapped. Let alone lease it out. Do you realize how insane this is? She huffed. You're blowing this out of proportion, Riley. It's family. Sometimes we do things informally. Forging my signature isn't informal, Mom. It's illegal. She clicked her tongue. Why are you being so harsh? It's Christmas. There it was again. That old guilt. But it didn't work this time. Because you all made a choice, I said. You chose to go behind my back. You chose to erase me. So don't talk to me about Christmas. I hung up. And that was the last time I spoke to her that week. 3 days later, Sean showed up in Seattle. I opened the door to find him standing there, sheepish grin on his face, hands shoved in the pockets of a too-expensive leather jacket. "Bro," he said, "let's talk." I didn't move. "How did you know where I live?" "Tessa," he said, without blinking. "She said you'd cool off by now." I stepped aside, not because I wanted to forgive him, but because I needed answers. We sat in my living room. I didn't offer him a drink. Sean looked around. "This place is nice. Didn't realize you were doing this well." That rankled. "I keep my business private." "Yeah," he said. Clearly. There was a long pause. "I didn't know about the lease," he said finally. "I swear. I thought you were letting her use the place." "And you didn't think it was weird that I wasn't there?" I asked. "That I hadn't posted, called, or shown up?" He shrugged. "I figured you were doing your solo thing again. You're hard to read, man." I didn't respond. Sean leaned forward. "Look, I get it. It was messed up. But you know how Tessa is. She thinks everything is hers by default. Always has. She crossed a line." "I know," he said quickly. "And she knows. But if you press charges or sue or something, Mom's gonna have a meltdown. Dad too. You're gonna nuke the family over this." "They already nuked it," I said. He rubbed his jaw. "So what now?" "I don't know," I said truthfully. "But I'm not sweeping this under the rug." He left soon after. Didn't argue. Didn't apologize again either. But later that night, I got a text from Tessa. "Sean told me you're being serious about this. Riley, you wouldn't actually ruin our family over a cabin. You've always had a flair for dramatics, but this is too far. Let it go." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed a single sentence and hit send. "I've let a lot go, Tessa, but not this." And that's when everything started to unravel. The fallout wasn't loud. It didn't come crashing down like in movies. No dramatic confrontations in the rain. No tables flipped at family dinners. It was quieter than that. More suffocating. Like the slow spread of cold air under a door. The kind of silence that hums in the background and makes your skin itch. For the next few weeks, the family group chat went dark. Not that I expected applause for finally standing up for myself, but the sheer, synchronized silence was jarring. Nobody said a word. Not even the passive-aggressive "hope everyone's doing well" messages that usually followed arguments. It was like I'd been carved out, neatly, like fat from meat. Still technically there, but not wanted. January rolled in fast, and the Denver cabin echoed with the sound of movers. I flew back for 2 days to oversee the transition. Boxes, signatures, walkthroughs, keys handed off to new tenants. I changed the door codes, updated the listing with the management agency under my name only, and removed all backup keys. I'd locked down everything, literally and figuratively. And yet, the place felt hollow. Not because I missed them, but because I realized, maybe for the first time in my adult life, that the version of family I'd been chasing didn't exist. Not really. It had always been an illusion. Fragile, scripted, photoshopped into existence by people who smiled wide for the holiday card and then cut you out of the picture the moment it became inconvenient. I sat alone in the cabin that night, last night before tenants moved in, on the floor, wrapped in a throw blanket, drinking tea that tasted like paper. The furniture had been cleaned, the decorations boxed. It didn't feel like mine anymore, and oddly, that made it easier to let go. I realized I didn't want this place to be some shrine to forgiveness. I didn't want it to sit empty waiting for a family that would never knock. So I stopped waiting. The next few months were quiet, but not empty. I threw myself into work, not out of escapism, but purpose. I'd been toying with an idea for months, something tech-adjacent, but more personal. A mentorship platform for young entrepreneurs who didn't come from flashy backgrounds or elite universities. People like me, quiet builders, overlooked minds, the ones expected to understand, while others got the spotlight. I started sketching it out. Slowly, methodically. Late nights, early mornings, whiteboards and wireframes. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need applause this time. There's something strange about working in silence after years of trying to be heard. At first, it's disorienting. You wonder if you're disappearing. But then, it becomes power. You start doing things for you. Not for validation. Not to prove a point. Just because it matters to you. I built a skeleton team. 2 designers, 1 back-end engineer, 1 community lead. All of them freelancers I'd worked with before. We called it Foundry, because it was about building, shaping, forging something real. At night, I walked. Just walked. Around my neighborhood in Seattle. No headphones. No distractions. I needed to learn how to be alone without feeling punished. I started noticing things I hadn't seen in years. The uneven sidewalk near the corner bakery, the old man with the blue cap who always nodded at me, the cat that seemed to own the entire block. The world had been there all along. I'd just been looking somewhere else. I also started therapy. Not because of the cabin, not because of Tessa, but because I realized I'd been carrying too much for too long and calling it strength. The therapist, Marla, was a gentle, thoughtful woman who asked very little in the first few sessions. Just enough to let me empty out the clutter. Memories of being skipped over, dismissed, used. "You said something interesting last week," she said one Thursday. "You said, 'I'm the one who never needed anything.' Do you think that was true?" I shrugged. "I think it's what they wanted to believe." She nodded slowly. "And what did you want?" It was such a simple question, but I didn't have an answer. I started journaling after that. Not every day, just when it felt like too much. I wrote down things I never said aloud, like how I'd always hated being the easy child, how it wasn't easy to be quiet, how it hurt to buy gifts no one remembered, to send messages no one replied to show up and be invisible. I wrote about the cabin. I wrote about Christmas. I wrote about the night I saw the Instagram post and how the silence afterward had felt louder than any argument we'd ever had. And slowly, so slowly, I started feeling something strange. Not peace exactly, but clarity. I realized I didn't miss them. I missed the idea of them. The family I'd built in my head, the one that cared, that called, that showed up without being asked. That family didn't exist. Maybe it never had. And grieving it like a death felt oddly healing. One night in February, I got a message from Mark, Tessa's husband. "Hey man, I know things are tense. Just wanted you to know I had no idea about the lease stuff." That was all, Tessa. "We didn't mean to hurt you." I stared at the message for a long time. There was no apology, just a quiet absolving of responsibility. I didn't reply. 2 days later, I got a call from a Denver number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. "Hi Riley, this is Kathy from Snowview Elementary. I'm calling because Everly listed you as an emergency contact on her school file. There's no issue, just a clerical update, but we wanted to confirm if that information is still accurate." I blinked at the phone. I wasn't even told I was listed. They put me down as a backup. Without asking. "Still useful, huh?" I didn't call back. I forwarded the voicemail to Tessa with a single line. "Remove me from the school contact list." Immediately. No response. Of course. Foundry launched in April. Soft launch. Invite only. We rolled out to a small group of college grads and solopreneurs, many from underserved communities, first-gen students, people building quiet businesses out of dorm rooms and kitchens. We didn't go viral. We didn't need to. But people wrote to us. Long messages. Gratitude. Relief. Finally, something built for people like me. I saved every email. Printed a few. Framed one. I didn't tell anyone in my family. They wouldn't have asked anyway. One night in May, Sean messaged me again. No greeting. Just a screenshot of a family Facebook post. My parents had posted photos from Mother's Day brunch. Tessa, her kids, my parents. Balloons, cake, captions about blessings. I wasn't in it. I wasn't mentioned. Again, under the image, Sean had written, "You really done with them?" I stared at it for a while. Then I typed back, "I think they've been done with me for a long time. I'm just catching up." He didn't reply. That summer, I went back to the cabin, not to stay, just to check in, do some seasonal maintenance, make sure everything was running smoothly. The tenants were out for the weekend. It was quiet, still. I walked the old trails I used to hike as a kid, saw my breath in the morning mist, listened to the way the trees didn't ask for anything. On the way out, I stopped at a small gift shop by the lake. A carved wood sign caught my eye. It read, "Family isn't who you come from. It's who stands with you when you stop trying to earn it." I bought it, hung it in my apartment entryway. The next time my phone rang with a family name, I let it ring out. I didn't even flinch, because I wasn't falling anymore. I was climbing, and I was starting to like the view. The funny thing about clarity is that once it clicks into place, you start seeing patterns that were there all along. Little things I used to excuse. Mom's backhanded comments, Tessa's snide jokes wrapped in just teasing, Sean's disappearances whenever things got inconvenient, began to look less like isolated slips and more like a blueprint. A carefully balanced system where I played a role, the background character, the reliable one, the one who wouldn't make a fuss. And as long as I stayed in that role, everything ran smoothly for them. But now, I was out of frame. and they didn't know what to do. By early June, I was in a different place entirely, emotionally, mentally, even physically. I'd moved to a new condo near Pike Place Market. Exposed brick, wide windows, a view of the water if you tilted your head just right. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. No shared keys. No forced smiles and group photos. Just peace. I'd also taken the time to revisit some legal matters. The cabin, for example. After the forged lease incident, I'd updated the ownership records to route everything through a holding company I quietly set up called Lurwood Ventures. My name was nowhere public on the title anymore. The property taxes, the utilities, the contracts, they all pointed to Lurwood. If anyone went snooping, they'd hit a wall. Just a shell LLC in a chain of other shells. Why? Because I wanted to see if Tessa would try anything again. And I had a feeling she would. My instincts were proven right when I got an email from the property manager in late July. "Hi Riley. Just wanted to confirm something strange." A woman named Tess Reynolds emailed asking to regain management access to the cabin. She claimed to be the owner and sent a fake utility bill as proof. "Thought you should know." I stared at the email. So she was still trying. Still clinging to the illusion that if she could just convince someone, anyone, that she had a right to my things, I'd eventually fold. But I wasn't folding anymore. I replied, "Thank you for flagging this. Please forward me the email and attach a copy to the incident log. I'll handle the rest." Then I reached out to Rebecca, my attorney, and we drafted a cease and desist letter. Not just for Tessa, but for all of them. See, the more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep the entitlement ran. It wasn't just the cabin. It was the dozens of little things that had stacked up over the years. The phone plans I'd been paying for since college, the credit card I'd once co-signed for Sean that was still being used, the shared Netflix account where I was still the one footing the bill, despite not being welcome at Christmas. I wanted it all cut. So I sat down, spreadsheet in front of me, and started tallying. Not just money, but patterns. Connections. How often I was the fallback plan. The silent donor. The emotional janitor cleaning up after everyone's mess. By the end of that week, I had a list. And a plan. It started with quiet disentanglement. First, I froze the shared credit card. Sent Sean a courtesy email. "This card is being deactivated. Any balances are your responsibility going forward. Please don't contact me about payment. I won't be covering it." Second, I pulled the plug on the shared family streaming accounts. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, even the Ring account I'd once set up for Mom and Dad's house when they couldn't figure out how to install their own. Third, I removed myself from any and all emergency contact lists. Schools, doctors, even the vet for Tessa's dog. Yes, somehow, I'd ended up listed there too. Fourth, I filed paperwork to formalize Lurwood Ventures as the official owner of all 3 of my properties. The cabin, my condo, and a small duplex I'd quietly bought as a side investment. All trust managed. All ironclad. But it wasn't just about cutting them off. I wanted them to understand. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I invited them to lunch. All of them. At a quiet restaurant downtown. One of those wood-paneled places with linen napkins and waiters who don't write anything down. I booked a private room, just in case voices were raised. Or truths were finally heard. Tessa arrived first, of course, right on time, and already flustered. She was wearing her polished mom uniform, soft beige cardigan, gold pendant necklace, oversized sunglasses on her head like a crown. She looked around like she owned the place and barely acknowledged me when I stood to greet her. Then came Sean, 10 minutes late, smelling faintly like cologne and carelessness. And finally, my parents, my mother in pearls and pastel lipstick, my dad quiet, unreadable as always. We sat. No one ordered. They waited for me to speak. I didn't rush. I let the silence stretch just long enough to feel heavy. Then I folded my hands and said, "I wanted to say something once. Just once. And I wanted you all to hear it at the same time." Tessa rolled her eyes. "Riley, if this is about the cabin again." "It's not just about the cabin," I said evenly. "It's about everything." They stared. I continued. "For years, I let things slide. I paid. I showed up. I didn't complain. I thought that's what family meant. But now I realize it was just permission. Permission for all of you to keep taking and pretending it was normal." My mom frowned. "That's not fair." "No, what's not fair is being excluded from Christmas in my own home. What's not fair is being told I'm selfish for reacting to fraud. What's not fair is being treated like a backup generator that no one wants until the lights go out. Sean shifted uncomfortably. Tessa crossed her arms. I pulled out a small folder and slid it across the table. Inside was a printed breakdown of everything I deactivated, transferred, removed, or closed. It wasn't dramatic. Just facts. These are the accounts I've shut down, the cards I've closed, the utilities I've transferred. Going forward, I'm not your fallback. I'm not your sponsor. And I'm not your scapegoat. Tessa scoffed. Is this revenge? Some power trip? No, I said. This is freedom. Yours and mine. My dad finally spoke. Son, this seems a little drastic. I met his eyes. No, Dad. What was drastic was forging my name. What was drastic was cutting me out of holidays and then acting shocked when I didn't want to fund the next one. They didn't apologize. I didn't expect them to. I paid the bill without a word and left. I never expected that conversation to change them. But I needed it. Not for closure, but clarity. And that clarity? It gave me momentum. Foundry hit its stride that summer. We brought in new mentors, self-made business owners, investors who'd built wealth without Ivy League degrees or flashy VC deals. We partnered with local colleges and startup incubators. We launched a podcast. I even gave a few interviews, anonymously at first, then eventually by name. One of them ended up in a business newsletter Tessa subscribes to. She didn't reach out. But 2 weeks later, I got a LinkedIn connection request from Mark. No message. Just a silent bridge-building gesture. I didn't accept. Not yet. Because I wasn't done building something of my own. Something they couldn't take credit for. Something they couldn't hijack or twist into a photo op. Something that wasn't a cabin or a family brunch or a birthday dinner where no one remembered my name. This was mine. And the best part? They had no idea what was coming next. Revenge, I've come to realize, doesn't always need to look like fire. It doesn't have to be loud or cruel or wrapped in petty theatrics. The most satisfying revenge is quiet, surgical, the kind that doesn't demand applause but leaves no room for denial. And in the end, mine wasn't just about payback. It was about putting a period at the end of a sentence they never let me finish. By September, Foundry had gone from a small mentorship circle to something bigger. We'd attracted the attention of a few angel investors, not because I was chasing money, I had enough, but because they believed in what we were doing. We weren't just helping new entrepreneurs. We were teaching them how to navigate a system that had ignored people like us for too long. We were showing them how to build something with no family name, no rich uncle, no safety net. In the middle of all that growth, something poetic happened. I got a call from a nonprofit organization I'd worked with before, small business grants for single parents, mostly women, often overlooked. They were losing funding, and a mutual contact said they were looking for someone to quietly step in and help restructure the board and offer operational support. No fanfare, just someone who knew how to rebuild. I asked for the board list. Tessa's name was on it. Apparently, she'd been on the board for 2 years. A community face, they called her. She helped with social media, fundraising events, donor dinners, mostly surface-level things. But she was good at playing the polished advocate. The look at this empowered mompreneur aesthetic. I asked for a meeting. Quietly, the executive director, Dana, met me for coffee. I explained who I was. I told her about Foundry. I didn't bring up Tessa at all. Dana, it turned out, had heard of our platform. She smiled wide. We've been trying to build something similar in-house, she said. But we don't have the tech. Or the staff. I offered to help. I asked for no salary. No title. Just a consulting agreement that would give me access to the organization's operational structure. A foot in the door. She said yes. And just like that, I stepped into my sister's world. But not as a brother. As the guy she hadn't seen coming. Over the next 6 weeks, I worked quietly. I reviewed budgets. I optimized workflows. I hosted a virtual workshop on funding strategies that drew more attendance than any of their prior donor dinners. Dana was thrilled. So was the board. They offered me a formal seat. I accepted. Tessa didn't even know I was involved. We were ships passing in adjacent inboxes. She still thought I was just that tech guy in Seattle. Then came the Grant Gala. Annual event. Big venue. Open bar. Silent auction. All the right hashtags. I was invited as a board member. So was she. I didn't RSVP. Instead, I asked Dana for a favor. I offered to sponsor the event, anonymously. Full venue rental, catering, AV. No name on the banners. No speeches. Just one small request. I wanted to handle the donor appreciation video. She agreed. I called in a favor from a videographer friend. We gathered footage from mints at Foundry, testimonials, stories, people who'd built side hustles into storefronts, who'd paid rent from their first freelance gigs, who no longer had to choose between daycare and chasing a dream. I narrated it myself. Calm, simple, no bragging, just truths. At the end of the video, a black screen faded in. Just white text. This event was made possible by a silent investor. Someone who believes in second chances, even when others only remember the first mistake. The room was dead quiet when it ended. I know because Dana told me. Tessa was at the front table. She clapped politely. Then Dana got up and made her speech. She thanked the board. She thanked the mentors. And then, casually, she said, "We're especially grateful to our new operations advisor, Riley, whose platform, Foundry, is now an official partner, and whose generosity made tonight possible." Tessa's face, Dana later told me, turned to stone. I hadn't just shown up. I'd built something under her nose and lifted the very community she claimed to champion. Without her help, without her approval, without ever asking for a seat at her curated table. She didn't come over that night. She didn't text. But 2 days later, she resigned from the board. No explanation. No farewell post. Just gone. And that's when the ripple started. See, once people realized she wasn't involved in Foundry, had never been, they started asking questions. Especially some of the nonprofit's top donors. One of them reached out to me directly. "We always assumed you two were partners," she said. She always implied. "She implies a lot of things," I replied with a smile. The next time I heard from Tessa, it wasn't a message. It was a podcast. One of those lifestyle shows where she was a guest, episode about overcoming toxic family dynamics. She told a neat little story about being betrayed by a sibling who used their success to sabotage her community work. She never said my name. She didn't have to. But I didn't respond. Because I didn't need to. While she recorded her curated narrative, I was closing a partnership deal with a university incubator that would give Foundry access to 1,200 students annually. Real people. Real change. Sean reached out again in November. This time it was different. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I just wanted to say, I think I get it now. What it feels like to be left out. Things have been weird. Mom and Dad barely talk to me unless they need something. Tessa's freezing me out. It sucks." I stared at his message for a long time. Then I replied, "I'm not happy that you're hurting, but I am glad you're starting to see it." He didn't reply for a while. Then, "Can we talk sometime? Just us?" I said yes, because not all bridges need to be burned. Some just need new architects. As for my parents, the silence stretched into winter. No calls, no cards, not even a passive-aggressive Facebook tag. And yet, I felt lighter than I ever had. I celebrated the holidays with a few close friends, the ones who'd become my chosen family. We cooked. We laughed. I hosted them in my condo, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to check my phone for obligatory family messages. Because none were coming, and I was finally okay with that. Then, on Christmas morning, my phone buzzed. Not with a call, but with a photo. A text from Sean. He and his girlfriend. Someone new, someone warm, smiling in front of a tiny tree, holding mugs with "starting over" written in gold cursive. Below it, he'd written, "No family drama this year. Just peace. Hope you found yours too." I smiled. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. Because revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about reclamation. Reclaiming space. Reclaiming peace. Reclaiming the version of yourself they tried to convince you didn't matter. I looked around my home, my life, myself, and I knew I hadn't just walked away. I'd risen. My name's Eric. I'm 37, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had a decent grasp on what boundaries meant. I'm a project manager for a mid-sized construction company, and in my free time, I like to tinker in the garage, small carpentry stuff, building shelves, restoring old tools, that kind of thing. The garage has always been my space, my sanctuary. It's where I went after long, draining days when I needed peace and a bit of what does therapy. But that peace? It didn't vanish all at once. It was chipped away, slowly, subtly, until one morning I found myself staring at a padlock on my own garage door. And that's when everything changed. It all started innocently enough. My wife, Jess, had always been close with her family, her parents, Frank and Marlene, and her younger brother, Troy. They live about 20 minutes from us, in a cramped two-bedroom townhouse that's bursting at the seams. They're not bad people exactly, just messy, disorganized. The kind of folks who can't throw away a broken chair because someone might fix it someday, but that someone is never them. When they called one weekend and asked if we had a little extra space in our garage for some boxes, I didn't think much of it. At first, it really was just a few boxes. 2 cardboard containers labeled Christmas and books. I shoved them in a back corner, under my workbench, and figured they'd grab them once they needed their decorations or found time to sort them out. But then the visits started increasing. Every couple of weeks, Frank would swing by with just one more thing, usually dragging a reluctant Troy with him. Soon it wasn't just boxes, it was chairs, bags, some old gym equipment, and what looked like parts of a disassembled futon. My workbench became harder to access. My floor space shrank. I had to move things around constantly just to get to my drill press. I brought it up with Jess, casually at first. "Hey, your parents are kind of taking over the garage," I said one evening while we were cleaning up after dinner. She waved it off with a tired smile. "They're just storing a few things, Eric. It's not forever. Be patient, okay?" I tried to be. I really did. But patience, it turns out, has a shelf life, especially when your garage starts to look like a second-hand furniture warehouse. A few more weeks passed, and I came home one night to find Frank and Marlene inside the garage, going through my drawers. Frank was holding one of my wrenches, squinting at it like he wasn't sure if it was his or mine. "Hey," I said, not harshly, but not soft either. "What are you guys looking for?" "Oh," Marlene chimed in. "We were just trying to find a screwdriver. Troy thought he left one here." "Why would Troy leave a screwdriver in my garage?" I asked, not entirely joking. Frank chuckled. "Well, we've all been using the space so much lately. It's kinda like a shared garage, right?" I didn't laugh. I didn't even blink. I just stared at them until they awkwardly shuffled out. That night, I told Jess point blank, "Your parents need to move their stuff. This isn't working. I can't even use my tools without tripping over their junk." She sighed, like I was the unreasonable one. "It's not junk. And they don't have space, Eric. Come on, it's just the garage. Why are you so territorial about it?" That hit a nerve. I don't ask for much. I don't care if her mom rearranges our living room every Christmas, or if Troy drops by and eats all our cereal. But the garage, that was mine. My one little bubble. But instead of arguing, I let it go. For the moment. A few days later, I noticed something strange. One of my tool cabinets had been moved. Not slightly bumped, but completely relocated to make space for a giant plastic shelving unit filled with God knows what. I opened a few bins out of curiosity, extension cords, tangled holiday lights, a waffle maker, and, bizarrely, a shoebox full of old VHS tapes. It was chaos. I went inside and asked Jess if she knew what happened. She barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, yeah," she said. "Mom came by earlier. She needed more space and thought it'd be better to organize everything on shelves. Isn't that more efficient?" Efficient. Right. For them, maybe. I was furious, but I held it in. Instead of blowing up, I started moving my tools into the basement, carving out whatever corner I could between the water heater and the washing machine. It wasn't ideal, but I was tired of fighting. At least, that's what I told myself. Until the padlock. It was a Saturday morning when I found it. I had just come back from a hardware store run, coffee in hand, eager to finally repair the busted hinge on our side gate. But when I walked up to the garage, my key didn't work. I frowned and tried again. That's when I noticed the shiny new padlock, thick, heavy-duty, with a fresh gleam like it had just been installed that morning. I stood there in disbelief, gripping the handle like maybe, just maybe, if I pulled hard enough, reality would bend in my favor. I stormed inside. Jess was in the kitchen, humming and making a smoothie. "Jess," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "why is there a padlock on the garage?" She didn't turn around. "Oh, that. Dad put it on. He said they didn't want anything disturbed since it's mostly their stuff now." I blinked. "Their stuff? Their garage?" She shrugged like it was the most normal thing in the world. "You haven't really been using it much lately, Eric. You've got your tools downstairs now. They just needed a secure place for everything. You understand, right?" No, I didn't understand. Not one bit. My heart was pounding in my chest, a mix of anger, betrayal, and something deeper I couldn't even name yet. I walked to the hallway, opened the closet, and grabbed my toolbox. I didn't say a word. Not when Jess asked where I was going. Not when she muttered something about me being dramatic. I just walked outside, stared at that padlock one more time, and started unscrewing the hinges. I didn't break it. I didn't need to. I had enough tools to bypass a silly lock. Within minutes, I had the door open and stood in the garage, surrounded by everything that had slowly replaced me. Every shelf, every bin, every dusty old chair felt like a slap in the face. I took a long, steady breath. Then I made a decision. By noon, I had cleared a third of the garage. Carefully, methodically, I placed everything neatly on the curb, wrapped in plastic if it looked fragile, stacked where it wouldn't fall. I wasn't doing this in a rage. I was doing this like someone handling biohazard. Because that's what it felt like. Contaminated. Wrong. At 3:45 p.m., Jess came outside. Her eyes widened. "Eric, what are you doing?" I didn't stop packing. "Reclaiming my garage," I said quietly. She walked over, her voice rising. "You can't just throw their stuff out." "I'm not throwing it out," I said calmly. "It's on the curb. They can pick it up anytime." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "You're being unreasonable." I turned to face her fully. "No, Jess. What's unreasonable is me being locked out of my own space because your family can't rent a storage unit like normal adults." Before she could reply, my phone buzzed. It was Frank, then Marlene, then Troy. I didn't answer. I just kept working. And by sunset, everything was out. Every last box, bin, and bag. And what I did next, well, let's just say it made Frank go absolutely pale when he arrived. Frank pulled up around 6:15 p.m. in his beat-up Ford Explorer, tires screeching slightly as he braked too hard in front of our driveway. Marlene sat in the passenger seat, already glaring at me like I'd set their house on fire instead of just putting some clutter on the curb. Jess was trailing behind them, her arms crossed, her face tense with that half-pained, half-disbelieving expression I'd grown far too familiar with over the last year. Frank stepped out like he was storming a battlefield. "What is all this?" he barked, waving toward the rows of plastic bins and garbage bags now lined along the curb like soldiers awaiting inspection. "Why is our stuff out here?" I didn't even pause from what I was doing, taping a final label to a box of tangled Christmas lights. "Because it doesn't belong in my garage." He stared at me like I'd just spoken in another language. "Our garage," he corrected. I turned and faced him, finally. "No, Frank. My garage. I pay for this house. The mortgage. The property taxes. The maintenance. You've been squatting in my workspace for 6 months. You crossed a line." Marlene scoffed from behind him, arms flailing slightly as she stepped forward. "Squatting? Oh, please, Eric. We asked permission." "Yes, for 2 boxes," I shot back. 2 boxes. That somehow turned into 20 bins, a treadmill, an entire shelving unit, and a padlock on my door. "You didn't ask for that." Frank's face started turning red, veins rising slightly on his temple. "You're being petty. It was a storage favor. Families help each other out." "And I did help," I replied. "For months. But helping you doesn't mean handing over ownership. That's not family, that's exploitation." Jess was standing behind them now, silent, but I could feel her watching everything. She hadn't said a word since I started emptying the garage. Her expression wasn't furious, not exactly, but stunned, maybe even ashamed. She hadn't expected me to go through with it. Troy finally pulled up around 6:30 in his tiny Hyundai, slamming the door shut and walking over with that signature smug smirk. "Wow," he muttered, shaking his head. "You're really losing it, huh?" I glanced at him, then pointed toward the sidewalk. "The stuff's sorted by owner. Your bins are on the far end. You serious right now?" He laughed, still smirking like this was some petty prank. "You're kicking us out over a garage? You've got the whole house, man. Why do you care so much?" "Because I gave an inch and your family took the whole damn mile. You guys crossed every boundary I set. You made yourself at home in a place I never invited you into. Then you locked me out of my own space. That's not how this works." Frank took a step closer, posture rigid. "We trusted you. We thought you were family. But you're acting like a stranger." I stepped up, face to face. "No, Frank. You expected me to be passive, to just roll over and accept it. And when I didn't, you acted like I was the villain." Marlene looked like she was about to explode. "We could have just talked about this." "You mean like when you rearranged my garage without asking?" I snapped. "Or when you told my wife it was your space now? Or when you put a damn padlock on the door like I was some trespasser in my own home?" That silenced her for a second. Frank finally broke the pause. "You're going to regret this, Eric." I smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the smile of someone who'd finally reached the end of a very long rope. No, I already regret letting it go on this long. And then I turned away. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The next morning, I woke up early and walked out to the curb to find a few of the bins still sitting there. Most of the bigger items were gone, loaded up into Frank's car after the shouting match the night before. But 3 bins were left behind, and one was open, clearly rummaged through. I sighed. Of course, they hadn't picked everything up. At breakfast, Jess was quiet. She didn't touch her food, didn't look up from her plate. I waited for her to say something, anything, but the silence stretched for minutes. Finally, I broke it. So, are we going to talk about what happened yesterday? She swallowed, but still didn't meet my eyes. You embarrassed them. I felt something harden in my chest. I reclaimed my space. They embarrassed themselves. Her voice was soft. You didn't tell me you were going to do that. You didn't tell me they were putting a lock on my garage, I said flatly. She looked up finally, and the hurt in her eyes almost made me waver. I didn't know they would. I thought they'd stop eventually. I stood up and poured myself another coffee, needing something to do with my hands. They weren't going to stop, Jess. You know that now, don't you? She didn't answer, but she didn't argue either. Later that day, I moved all of my tools back into the garage. It felt strange at first, like returning to a room that had been occupied by strangers. But with each shelf I reorganized and each tool I put back in place, I felt something settle inside me. Not just relief, control. Like I had taken back something that had been quietly stolen from me piece by piece. But then, that evening, something unexpected happened. I got a knock at the door. Not the front door, the side door. The one that leads into the garage. When I opened it, Frank was standing there again. But this time, he wasn't shouting. He looked rattled, pale. His hands were shaking slightly as he held out a single piece of paper toward me. I took it and scanned it. It was a receipt for a storage unit. A very large one. Just wanted to let you know, he muttered. Eyes fixed on the floor. We won't need your garage anymore. Then, quietly, he added, you made your point. And walked away. But that wasn't the part that shook me. Because behind him, across the street, I saw Marlene. She was standing next to a truck, her face red, her hands on her hips. And she was watching Jess, who stood on our porch. And Jess was watching me. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. That night was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. The kind of quiet where the air feels too still, like the calm before a thunderstorm. Jess didn't say anything else after Frank left. She just stood there, arms folded across her chest, eyes distant. I didn't press her. I knew better by now. She was processing. Or maybe calculating. Either way, the silence between us spoke louder than any argument could have. I spent the rest of the evening in the garage, slowly reclaiming it inch by inch. I swept the floor twice, not because it needed it, but because the rhythm of it helped calm my thoughts. I set my toolboxes back on the shelves, reinstalled my pegboard, and even rehung the vintage Miller Lite sign I'd picked up years ago, the one Jess hated and had conveniently forgotten to rehang after the garage got taken over. As I worked, I realized just how much I'd let go of, not just the space, but my own voice. When I finally came inside, Jess was curled up on the couch, watching something on TV with the volume low. I sat on the opposite end. For several long minutes, we both pretended to be immersed in the show, but neither of us was really watching it. Eventually, she said, you could have told me what you were going to do. I didn't think you would have backed me up, I answered honestly. And I needed to know that I could still stand up for myself, even if it meant doing it alone. She flinched a little, but didn't deny it. After a pause, she asked, are you going to hold this against me forever? I shook my head. No, but I'm also not going to pretend it didn't happen. That was the end of it for the night, anyway. The next morning, I found out what you made your point really meant. I went out to the curb to bring in the trash bin and noticed a folded note taped to the mailbox. No envelope, just my name in sloppy, all-caps handwriting. I knew it was Frank's the second I saw it. He writes like he's still using a chalkboard. The note read, hope you're happy. You've humiliated your own family over a garage. Your wife's upset. Your in-laws are hurt. And you've made enemies out of people who only ever tried to support you. Think about that. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a signature. I crumpled it without reading it twice. But as I turned back toward the house, I noticed something else. The side fence gate was slightly ajar. Odd. I always lock it. I walked over and spotted faint footprints in the dirt. Someone had been in our backyard. That evening, I installed a camera facing the back gate. Not because I was paranoid, but because I knew the way Frank operated. He wasn't the kind of guy who let things go quietly. He simmered. He brooded. He plotted. The man once held a grudge for 5 years over a poker game because someone accused him of looking at their cards. A couple of days passed without incident, though the atmosphere in the house was still cold. Jess was civil, but distant. She cooked meals, we exchanged small talk, but it all felt mechanical. Like we were both walking on a tightrope and afraid to tip either way. Then came Saturday. I was in the garage, working on refinishing a cabinet I'd found on Craigslist, when the door to the house swung open and Jess walked in, holding her phone. "They posted about you," she said flatly. "Who?" "My mom. On Facebook." I wiped my hands on a rag and raised an eyebrow. "What kind of post?" She handed me her phone. It was Marlene's profile. She'd shared a post with a smiling stock photo of a broken family, complete with sad eyes and dramatic lighting. The caption read, "When you do everything for someone, let them marry your daughter, let them into your life, and they repay you by throwing your belongings in the street and locking you out. Some people are only family by name, not by heart. Hashtag disrespect, hashtag ungrateful, hashtag family matters." The comments were worse. One of her friends wrote, "He sounds toxic. Your daughter deserves better." Another chimed in, "Sounds like you need to move in with her and get her out of that situation." And then one particularly nosy neighbor, Linda, who I already hated, had added, "I saw that stuff on the curb. I thought someone was evicted. Can't believe it was your son-in-law. Shameful." I handed the phone back. "So that's how they're spinning it." Jess didn't say anything. She just sat down on the edge of my workbench and rubbed her temples. "They're never going to stop, are they?" "Not unless you make them," I said gently. "I don't want to be in the middle of this, Eric." I nodded. "I know. But pretending you're not in the middle doesn't make it go away. Right now, they're attacking your husband online because they didn't get their way." Her shoulders slumped. "What do you want me to do?" "Tell them it's not okay. Tell them to take the post down. Tell them you're on my side." She hesitated. Then, quietly, "I don't want to pick sides." And that's when I realized she already had. She just didn't want to say it out loud. Later that evening, after she went to bed, I sat in the garage and stared at nothing for a long time. The air smelled like sawdust and varnish, familiar and grounding. I kept thinking about that note Frank left me, about how I'd humiliated them. It's funny how entitled people always feel victimized when you finally draw a line. The next day, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, there was no one there. Just a manila envelope on the welcome mat. Inside, something that made my stomach twist. Because now, they weren't just being petty. They were trying to escalate. And they just made a massive mistake. I picked up the envelope and felt a weight in my chest before I even opened it. It was thick, heavy, like it was trying to warn me. This changes everything. I brought it into the garage, sat at my workbench, and opened it with the same care I'd used to handle a splintered board about to snap. Inside were photocopies of receipts, photos printed from a phone, and a handwritten letter from Frank. The receipts were for tools. My tools. Photos showed my workbench, my drill press, my shelves, all labeled in sloppy black Sharpie with little notes like, "Ours, family property, contributed by Frank." The letter was worse. It read, "Eric, since you've decided to make things legal and draw lines, here's what you need to know. Many of the tools and items in that garage were paid for or co-purchased during visits over the past year. We have proof of contribution and are prepared to claim our share. If you do not return our items or compensate us for what's missing, we will be pursuing small claims court." This could have stayed civil. Frank. I stared at the page. The ink blurred slightly from how tight my jaw clenched. Frank was trying to claim ownership over my property. He was rewriting history to paint himself as the generous benefactor who'd outfitted my garage as if he'd ever paid a single cent. It was a desperate bluff. He didn't have a leg to stand on, and he knew it, but that didn't mean he wouldn't try to drag me through the mud. I called Jess into the garage. She took one look at the papers, and her face turned white. "You're kidding," she whispered. "I wish I was," I said, handing her the letter. "I don't even know what half of this is supposed to prove." She looked at me, then back at the photos. "That's your sander. I remember you ordering it on your birthday 2 years ago." "Exactly. And my dad gave me that leveler as a gift when I got my first job in construction. These aren't Frank's. He's trying to fabricate a narrative because I embarrassed him." She looked up at me slowly. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to respond, but not the way he wants." That night, I called a lawyer friend of mine named Lewis. We'd worked together on a few site compliance issues before, and I trusted him. I sent over the photos, the receipts, the letter. He reviewed everything and called me back within 2 hours. Yeah, this isn't going anywhere, he said. But you need to make a paper trail. Respond once, clearly, and then no more contact. Make it airtight in case he actually tries to take this to court. So I drafted an email. Calm, professional, not emotional. Frank, I received your letter and reviewed the documents enclosed. To be clear, all tools and items currently in my garage were either purchased by me or gifted to me, and I have supporting receipts or witness statements to that effect. Your claims are unfounded. If you proceed with legal action, I will counter for harassment, attempted fraud, and defamation. Any further contact should go through my legal counsel. Eric. I copied Lewis on the email. Then I hit send. The response came the next day. From Marlene. You think you're so smart, hiding behind lawyers. We trusted you. We let you marry into our family. We treated you like a son. And this is how you repay us? You've turned Jess against us. You've poisoned her. You're ruining everything. And then, the final line. If Jess leaves you over this, it'll be your own fault. I showed the message to Jess. She read it slowly, mouth tightening with each sentence. Then she handed the phone back and said, delete it. You okay? I asked. She nodded. No one talks to my husband like that. Not even my mother. It was the first time in weeks I saw fire in her eyes again. That night, Jess called her parents. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She spoke with the same cold, deliberate tone I'd used when I placed their things on the curb. I saw the message, Mom. I saw the Facebook post too. You need to take it down. And you need to back off, permanently. I could only hear Jess's side of the call, but I could feel the storm on the other end. No, she said. You don't get to twist this into Eric being the villain. You locked him out of his own garage. You acted like it was yours. You used me to do it. You made him feel like a stranger in his own house. And now you're playing the victim. Her hand trembled slightly as she held the phone, but she never broke. This isn't just about the garage anymore. This is about you. About how you manipulate people and expect us all to bend to your reality. Well, I'm done. You're not welcome in our home anymore. Not unless you apologize. Another pause. And then, no. This time you don't get to decide when the conversation's over. She hung up. That night, for the first time in weeks, Jess came out to the garage and sat beside me while I worked. You were right, she said quietly. About all of it. I didn't say anything at first. I just handed her a small box of screws I was sorting, and we worked together in silence for a bit. They've always been like that, she added after a while. But I never saw how deep it went until now. They make you feel like you owe them for letting you exist in their world. Yeah, I said. That's exactly it. I don't want to live in their world anymore. The fallout came fast after that. The Facebook post vanished within 24 hours. I imagine it wasn't by choice. Jess had commented directly on it, tagging her mother and calling her out for lying. It got messy. Dozens of comments from mutual friends, some defending, others asking what really happened. But it was too late for damage control. Jess blocked her parents. Then, we changed the locks. Not just for the garage, for every door. I added cameras to the front and side entrances, and we even got a doorbell cam. I wasn't taking chances. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail, handwritten again, but this time from Troy. He didn't want to pick sides, he said. But he thought it was messed up that we'd cut off contact over some storage space. I didn't respond. Just didn't either. We were done explaining ourselves. The garage is quiet now. Mine again. The tools are back where they belong. The floor's clean. The Miller Lite sign is crooked, but I like it that way. It reminds me that this is my space, not anyone else's. Sometimes I catch Jess in the doorway, watching me work. She smiles now. Real smiles. Not the tight, apologetic kind she used to give when her family caused drama. We're stronger. We've got boundaries. We learned the hard way that you can't let people stay in your life just because they share blood, not if they poison your peace, twist the truth, and treat you like a resource instead of a person. Family isn't who says they love you. It's who respects you. And in the end, reclaiming my garage wasn't just about a room. It was about reclaiming myself. My name's Ian, I'm 42, and for most of my life, I've been the guy who shows up. The uncle who remembers every birthday. The one who wires the emergency money, answers the 2 a.m. calls, and mails surprise care packages just because. I never thought much of it. I've done pretty well for myself, and helping family felt like the right thing to do. Or at least it used to. These days, I look back and wonder when the line between support and being used got so thoroughly erased. I don't have kids of my own, which in this family makes me the available one. The bachelor uncle with no obligations, no excuses, and, as my sister once put it, no real priorities. Her words, not mine. Katie, my older sister by 2 years, has always been the center of our family's orbit. The loudest laugh at the table, the first to start a group chat, the unofficial planner of every holiday dinner. She also married Craig, who has had more jobs in the past decade than I can remember. Not because he's ambitious, but because he never holds on to one for long. Their son, Daniel, my 14-year-old nephew, used to be this shy, sweet kid who'd draw me pictures when I visited and hug me like he meant it. Somewhere between 12 and 14, though, that shifted. The warmth cooled. The hug stopped. Now it's all sarcastic comments, eye rolls, and a casual cruelty that makes me wonder what exactly is being said about me when I'm not around. I hadn't planned on attending this year's family dinner. I was tired, burnt out. Work had been a mess, and to be honest, I was starting to feel like I was the only one trying to hold anything together. But Katie insisted. "Daniel really misses you," she said over the phone. "He's been asking about you nonstop." That tugged at something. Maybe I was imagining the distance, or maybe I'd just been too caught up in my own head. So I packed up, bought Daniel the gaming laptop he'd been hinting at for months, and drove the 4 hours to their place. The dinner was set up like something out of a catalog. Katie had gone all out, twinkling lights on the patio, a centerpiece of autumn leaves and cinnamon-scented candles, and way too much food for a family of 6. Her in-laws were there, along with Craig's cousin and her kids, making it loud and crowded. I arrived right on time, laptop gift wrapped under my arm, and was greeted with the usual chorus of, "Ian, you made it," as if I'd flown in from another planet instead of making a routine drive like I always did. It wasn't until about halfway through the meal, just as Katie was serving dessert and Daniel was unwrapping the gift I'd brought, that it happened. He tore off the paper with an exaggerated yawn, like he was doing me a favor. The table leaned in, waiting to see what was inside. His eyes lit up for a second when he saw the box, high-end, sleek, exactly the model he wanted, but then that light faded into a smirk. He held up the laptop and turned to me. "Thanks, I guess," he said with a shrug. "Mom said you'd get it. She said you're basically just a pathetic wallet who thinks money buys love." A few people laughed. I mean, they actually laughed. His dad, his aunt. Even Katie gave one of those snort giggles that people do when they don't want to look too guilty. No one said, "Hey, that's not okay." No one said anything at all. The sound of that laughter, light, careless, cruel, cut deeper than I expected. I just sat there, blinking. For a second, I actually wondered if I had misheard him. But the smirk on Daniel's face told me I hadn't. I didn't say a word. I didn't make a scene or demand an apology. I just smiled, reached for my glass of water, took a slow sip, and pulled my phone from my pocket. 5 taps. That's all it took. One to cancel the streaming subscriptions I'd been paying for. One to revoke access to the shared family phone plan. One to disable the monthly rent auto payment I'd been covering ever since Craig lost his last job. One to unenroll Daniel from the pricey online tutoring platform I'd been footing the bill for. And the last one, the tuition installment for the private school he just got into. It hadn't gone through yet. Now, it wouldn't. Still, I didn't say a word. Not yet. I finished my water, placed the empty glass down gently, and stood. "Everything okay?" Katie asked, still half laughing, oblivious. "Yeah," I said, picking up my jacket. "I've just got to take care of a few things." "Oh, don't be dramatic," she rolled her eyes. "Daniel's just being a teenager." "That's exactly what I'm doing," I said. "Taking care of things." And I left. Quietly. No slammed doors. No final declarations. Just me, walking out into the cool evening air and letting the door close behind me. I didn't go home right away. I checked into a nearby hotel, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall for a good hour. I wasn't angry, not exactly. I was just done. Done with the transactional love. Done being treated like a human ATM. Done trying to earn a place in a family that had already assigned me a role and stripped it of all dignity. The next morning, I returned briefly, not to speak, not to argue, but to drop off something I'd been holding on to for a long time. A small wooden box. Nothing fancy, just something I'd carved years ago during a brief stint in woodworking. Inside, there was a folded letter, a few snapshots, and one very specific thing they weren't expecting. I left it on the kitchen counter while the house was still quiet. No one saw me come in, and no one saw me go. They found it later that afternoon. The letter inside the box was handwritten. Not typed, not scrawled in anger. Just clean, Steady penmanship on thick cream-colored paper, the kind I used to use when I wrote holiday cards before they all started tossing them unopened into a pile for later. It began with a single sentence, inked in a darker tone than the rest, underlined once. "This is everything you never bothered to ask." From there, the letter unfolded like a quiet avalanche. I started with Daniel. I reminded him of the time I spent 3 hours on a freezing December evening, waiting outside his school concert because no one else had time to show up, and how he cried when he saw me in the front row. I reminded him of the robot building kit he once begged for on his 10th birthday, and how I skipped out on a company bonus trip to afford it. I told him how proud I'd been when he used it to win his middle school science fair. I reminded him of the hours we spent together, side by side on the floor, building Lego cities while he told me his dreams of becoming an engineer. Then I shifted to Katie. I laid it all out, quietly and factually, like a ledger. Every rent payment since Craig's third job loss, 78 total. The car insurance for both their vehicles. The $3,200 loan when they were short on the down payment for their current house. The emergency dental procedure when Craig cracked his molar but refused to get insurance. The groceries during COVID. The birthday parties. The field trips. The school applications. The clothes. The emergencies that never stopped being emergencies. But most importantly, I pointed out the things that couldn't be itemized. The phone calls I answered when no one else picked up. The nights I stayed on the line with her while she cried in the garage, saying she felt trapped. The time I drove 3 hours in a thunderstorm just because she didn't want to be alone when Craig stormed out. The times I kept secrets, took the blame, bit my tongue. At the bottom of the letter, I added a single postscript. You didn't lose me because of a laptop. You lost me because you turned love into a receipt and then mocked the one person still paying. The snapshots were of the three of us, me, Katie, and Daniel from years ago. A camping trip. A birthday party at a bowling alley. A random Saturday with ice cream on our faces and sunburns on our cheeks. Back when things weren't perfect, but they were honest. I had kept them in a drawer for years. Now, they were theirs to keep or ignore. And beneath those photos, there was one final thing. A check. Made out to myself. Canceled. Torn cleanly down the middle and taped back together, visible, deliberate. Written across the memo line in capital letters was the word, enough. I heard from my neighbor, who was friends with Katie, that she found the box first. That she read the letter in full while everyone else was still lounging around, complaining about leftovers. That she didn't speak for a long time afterward, just stared at the box in silence like it had sucked all the oxygen from the room. Apparently, she showed Craig first. He scoffed, muttered something about me, always being dramatic, and went back to watching football. But Katie didn't. She kept reading the letter. Again and again. Daniel found it last. He opened it thinking maybe there was another gift inside. When he saw the torn check, he reportedly asked, "Wait, what does this mean?" No one answered him. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. Once. A text from Katie. "I didn't know it was this bad. I'm sorry. Please talk to me." I stared at that message for a long time. The kind of long where the screen dims and locks itself before you realize your thumb hasn't moved. But I didn't reply. I didn't block her. I didn't scream at her. I didn't write back some monologue of hurt or forgiveness. I just sat with it. Because that silence, that space between the click of a sent message and the nothing that follows, that's where they lived for years. And now they could stay there a while. I moved into a quiet rental about 45 minutes from my old place, close enough to work, far enough from family. I didn't tell anyone the address. Changed my number. Got a new email. Started small. Got back into woodworking. Met a few neighbors. Started sleeping through the night without keeping my phone at arm's reach, just in case. Then came the next message. "Please. Daniel's been asking where you are. He's not okay." I didn't answer her second message either. For a week, nothing followed. Then the third one came. Longer, more frantic. I told him what I said. I told him what I let him say. I was wrong. I don't know how to undo it. He hasn't touched the laptop. He hasn't come out of his room. Please, Ian. He doesn't hate you. He's just, it cut off there. I let that one sit too. See, I wasn't trying to punish a kid. I know Daniel's still young, still under the influence of the people around him. But that night, when he said those words, not just said them, but smirked and delivered them like a punchline at my expense, I saw the future. I saw the next 15 years. A grown man who never respected the hands that fed him because he was raised to believe those hands owed him everything. I wasn't going to help raise that man. That's when I started writing my second letter. Not to Katie this time. To Daniel. It took days. I'd write a few lines, walk away, come back and scratch half of them out. I didn't want to sound bitter. I didn't want to lash out. I wanted him to understand. Not just what he said, but what it meant. What it cost. When I finally sent it, through regular mail, no signature required. It was 8 pages long. Handwritten again. I had attached a small photo at the end, one I hadn't given them before. It was from the day I surprised him with tickets to that robotics convention 3 years ago. The one he told everyone was the best weekend of his life. He was holding the prototype he'd built, beaming, arms raised like he'd just won gold. And next to him, I was smiling, not for the camera, but for him. In the letter, I told him the story of how I had to sell an old collector's watch to afford that trip. It wasn't meant to guilt him. I didn't even think he remembered the watch. But I wanted him to know that love, real love, often hides in the details we never mention. The canceled trips, the skipped upgrades, the silent sacrifices made not for praise, but because someone wants you to shine, even if they have to stand in your shadow while you do. I ended it with a sentence I'd read once in a book and never forgot. When you mock the hand that feeds you, don't be surprised when it closes. That letter arrived on a Tuesday. I know because Wednesday morning, my new phone, which only a handful of people had the number to, lit up with a call from a strange area code. I almost didn't answer. It was Katie. Her voice cracked before she even said hello. I didn't give him your number. I swear, she said, rushing. He found the return address from the envelope. He asked me to call. Said he didn't want to text. He wants to talk. I didn't say anything. He said he's sorry, she whispered. I was still silent. Not out of anger. I was just waiting. Feeling. Katie continued. He's not asking for anything. He said to tell you he never realized how much you were doing. That we never made space for you. Only what you could give. There was a pause. Then her voice dropped. I was wrong, Ian. I really thought we were a family. But we weren't. We were just taking. And for the first time in months, I let myself breathe deep. I didn't rush to forgive. I didn't offer to come over. I didn't unlock any accounts or restart payments. But I did say one thing. Tell him I'll call him Sunday. That night, I went out to my small backyard, just a patch of grass and a cracked wooden chair I'd sanded down last week, and watched the sun fall behind the trees. It was quiet. No buzz of texts. No unread emails from family threads. Just me, the hum of crickets, and a strange feeling I hadn't known I was missing. Peace. But that peace didn't last long. Because 2 days later, a letter showed up at my door. No return address. No name. Inside, a note. You've made your point. Now undo the damage. Before we do. And that changed everything. I stared at that note for a long time. The handwriting was clipped, rushed, but familiar. No name, no threat spelled out. But the tone? The tone was venom with a velvet glove. There was only one person I knew who could write like that, Craig. I held the paper between my fingers, half expecting it to combust from the heat rolling off my skin. So that's how it was going to be. No apology. No accountability. Just a mask slipping for one brief second, and beneath it, the man who'd been quietly pulling strings in the background for years, getting what he wanted while smiling for the camera. I didn't call Daniel that Sunday. Instead, I called my lawyer Monday morning. I'll be honest. For a few days, I second-guessed everything. Was I overreacting? Was I really going to go this far over a few cruel words and years of neglect? But that letter, no, that warning was a pivot. A declaration that said, we've taken from you for this long, and we'll keep taking until you're dry. And if you try to stop us, we'll play victim. So I got methodical. First, I contacted every single subscription, account, or joint service I had ever signed up for in their names. Some of them dated back nearly a decade. Old streaming platforms. A second car lease I'd foolishly co-signed. Even the emergency-only credit card Craig had begged me to open, just in case the kids ever need anything. I called the bank next. Flagged everything. Froze the secondary card. Closed the linked accounts. Not a trace of my name remained in their financial ecosystem. Then I reached out to Daniel's school. I informed them that I would no longer be responsible for tuition and that all future invoices should go directly to the primary guardians. The woman on the phone paused, then said softly, "We've actually been meaning to contact you. There's an outstanding balance." Of course there was. Apparently, Craig had ignored multiple payment reminders. He'd been assuming correctly up until now that I'd cover the gap last minute, like always. I didn't. Next, I went through my files. There was an old document I'd kept years ago when Katie and I had a fleeting discussion about me becoming Daniel's legal guardian if anything ever happened to her and Craig. It was never finalized, just drafted, but I still had it. I scanned it, scribbled across the top in red ink, rescinded, indefinitely. I attached a fresh letter to go with it, explaining that my financial, legal, and emotional ties to that household were dissolved, effective immediately. No room for misinterpretation. I sent a final package to their address. Not to start a fight, just to end one. Inside was a typed letter, impersonal and cold by design, detailing every canceled account, every deactivated card, every legal step taken. I included receipts, termination confirmations, and a notarized statement that I would not be responsible for any debts moving forward. At the bottom, one final note, handwritten, "You raised a boy who laughed at love and married a man who used it. Neither of you will use mine again." I sealed it. No return address this time. I didn't hear from them for nearly a week. Then the phone calls began. First it was Katie, crying, then begging, then angry. "You've made your point, Ian. This is cruel. You're punishing a child." I let her rant. I didn't say a word. She left voicemails. Long, winding, guilt-drenched monologues laced with phrases like "family doesn't keep score" and "you know Daniel looked up to you." I didn't respond. Every time I listened to one, I thought of her laughing around that table, watching her son reduce me to a bank account with legs and doing nothing. Then Craig tried. One message. Short and smug. "Nice move. But don't forget, you were the one who insisted on being part of our lives. You don't just get to ghost your responsibilities now. If we go down, you go with us." And that's when I decided I was done being silent. I sent Craig a reply. Just once. "You're right. I did insist on being part of your lives. And now I'm insisting on being out of it. Completely. If you contact me again, directly or through anyone else, I'll have legal grounds for harassment. Don't test me." He didn't reply. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. This time from Daniel. His handwriting was messier than before, like he'd rewritten it several times. It was the kind of letter that read like a kid trying to sound older than he is. Formal words. Forced sincerity. But between the lines, there was something real. He admitted he didn't fully understand what he was saying at dinner, that he'd been parroting things he heard, that when he unwrapped the laptop and said what he said, he expected laughs, not damage, not silence. He didn't ask for money. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He just wrote this. "I don't know if you'll ever talk to me again, but I wanted you to know that I get it now. You weren't trying to buy love. You were giving it in the only way you knew how. And I didn't deserve it." I read that letter 5 times. And on the 6th, I cried. Not because it changed anything. Not because it made it okay. But because, for the first time in what felt like years, someone in that family actually saw me. I didn't call him. Not yet. I needed space. But I did send back one thing, a photo of that same robotics convention with a sticky note on the back. "Love is more than gifts. But I gave them because I believed in you. If you ever want to earn that back, not the gifts, but the belief, I'll be here." One day. I left it at that. A year passed. Katie and I didn't speak. Craig, to my knowledge, finally got a job and promptly lost it again. They moved to a smaller apartment. Daniel transferred schools. I stayed quiet, rebuilt my world, filled it with people who didn't see me as a wallet, but as a whole person. I got back into volunteering, started mentoring a few teens in the local community center, kids who reminded me of Daniel before the bitterness crept in. And one afternoon, a familiar face showed up. Daniel, a little taller, hair longer, no laptop in sight. Just him, nervously walking into the center with a robotics kit tucked under his arm. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said. I want to build again." So I pulled out a chair, sat down across from him, and nodded. "Let's start from scratch." And we did. That was the first day I stopped feeling used and started feeling something else entirely. Free. My name's Alex. I'm 32, and I've always been the easygoing one in the family. I'm the middle child between 2 siblings. My older brother Mark, the golden boy, and my younger sister Emily, the golden girl. I guess that made me the silver spoon, presentable enough, but not the first pick for anything important. Growing up, Mark could do no wrong. He once crashed my dad's car into a ditch, blamed it on slippery roads, and got off with a pat on the back. When I accidentally dropped a glass at dinner, I got a week of icy silence and a sarcastic classic Alex from Mom. That pretty much set the tone for everything that followed. So when Mark got engaged to Lisa, the most high-maintenance woman I've ever met, I didn't expect a warm welcome. Lisa comes from a family that thinks middle class is a slur. The first time we met, she looked at my shoes and asked if they were vintage or just worn out. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. Every time we interacted after that, there was a flicker of disdain behind her forced smiles. Still, I kept my distance. I figured she and Mark deserved each other, two people obsessed with optics, appearances, and Instagrammable moments. They loved the idea of love, as long as it got likes. The wedding planning was a circus from the start. I offered to help. Mark said, "We've got it covered." I sent them a thoughtful engagement gift. Nothing too flashy, just a framed photo of our grandparents' wedding day, something sentimental. Lisa texted back, "Ah, thanks. We'll find a place for it. Maybe in the basement, lol." I didn't reply. I just mentally shifted the budget I'd set aside for their wedding gift towards something less personal, more transactional. If I was just an obligation, I'd treat it like one too. 3 weeks before the wedding, Mom called me. "Just wear something formal. Don't overthink it. And be polite to Lisa's family, please." That last part had weight to it, like she expected me to be a problem. I bit my tongue. "Sure," I said. "Wouldn't miss it." And I wouldn't. Not because I was excited, but because I had a promise to keep. I told Dad years ago, back when he was sick, that I'd always be there for family milestones. He made me repeat it while we sat in the hospital waiting room after another round of chemo. "Even if you're treated like a ghost," he'd said with a tired smile. Especially then. So I showed up. The venue was a picturesque vineyard, the kind you only see in magazines or Hallmark movies. String lights everywhere, live quartet playing soft classical music, people dressed like they were auditioning for a perfume commercial. I arrived early, found the coordinator, and asked where I was sitting. She glanced at the list, frowned, then motioned me toward the back of the reception tent. "Table. Actually, you're near the fire exit. It's that chair right there." I followed her finger. It wasn't even a table, just a folding chair. Alone, tucked between a fake potted tree and a red exit sign. No place card, no table number, no name, just there. I stood still for a second, thinking it was a mistake. That someone would run over, apologizing, maybe offering me a seat somewhere real. But no one came. People were arriving in waves, smiles, hugs, cheers. I spotted Emily and Mom near the head table, laughing with Mark. I raised a hand. Emily waved half-heartedly. Mom didn't even acknowledge me. I try not to take it personally. Tried. That's when Lisa walked by, flanked by 2 bridesmaids. She saw me standing next to the folding chair and smirked. "Oh, you found your seat," she said, then gave me this once-over, like I was a thrift store donation. "Only real family gets a real table." I blinked. "Excuse me." She didn't even stop walking. "Don't take it personally," she said over her shoulder. It's just space was tight. I stood there for another full minute, heartbeat loud in my ears. The envelope in my pocket felt heavier than ever. It was a gift card, but not just any gift card. $1, $500 to a luxury spa resort. Something they mentioned in passing during the engagement party. "It's the only way to unwind after planning a wedding," Lisa had said, massaging her temples dramatically. I kept the card in an envelope with a handwritten note that said, "Enjoy a peaceful honeymoon," on me. But I didn't hand it over. I pulled the envelope out of my coat, looked at it for a moment, then tucked it back in. I turned around, walked toward the front of the tent, and as I passed the champagne table, I said just loud enough, "Enjoy the honeymoon while it lasts." A few people turned to look. My mom hissed, "Don't make a scene." Her eyes were hard, like she was already preparing her speech about how I ruined the day. But I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just smiled. Because I already had a plan. A quiet, subtle, slow-burn plan. I didn't leave immediately. I wanted to stay long enough to plant the seed. I made my way to the open bar and ordered a soda, casually sipping while watching the chaos swirl around the bride and groom. Lisa was glowing, for now circling from one curated photo opportunity to the next. Mark looked a little overwhelmed, but he always did when he didn't have a script to follow. The photographer shouted directions, the bridal party flitted around adjusting bouquets and reapplying lipstick, and I just stood there like a shadow no one noticed. Well, almost no one. My cousin Sarah, the only person in our family with a functioning emotional radar, found me by the bar. "Hey," she said, giving me that look, half sympathy, half, I'd burn this place down with you if you said the word. I just heard from the coordinator where they stuck you. Folding chair by the fire exit, I said, raising my glass in mock salute. Real classy. Her face twisted. You didn't deserve that. No, I agreed. But I've learned not to expect much. We talked for a few minutes, mostly small things, until I spotted the DJ starting to set up. That was my cue. I nodded toward the reception tent. You might want to keep your phone ready later, I said. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Should I be worried? I smiled. Not unless you're a fan of Lisa's curated reality. She didn't ask questions. She just grinned. Text me if you need backup. I slipped away before dinner was served. No one noticed. Not Mark, not Mom, not even Lisa, who was too busy adjusting her hair while someone took a video of her twirling under a chandelier. My car was parked down the gravel drive, past a little security booth and a line of catering vans. I sat behind the wheel for a minute, pulled out my phone, and opened the folder I'd been building for 3 months. It started small screenshots, mostly. Text from Lisa to the wedding planner, berating her for minor issues like using too many beige napkins. A few social media posts from Lisa's private Instagram account, where she mocked Mark's mom, our mom, for being dull as toast. I had copies of emails she accidentally CC'd me on when she meant to talk trash about the deadweight relatives, me included. But the real gem was a voice memo. A short, bitter rant she recorded after her bridal shower, where she called Mark a temporary phase and bragged about how his money was just her starter husband fund. She had sent it to one of her bridesmaids as a joke. That bridesmaid, Amanda, happened to also be friends with my ex, who happened to also be sick of Lisa's games. And that memo? Let's just say it had a date stamp, a clean audio file, and just enough venom to make even the most diehard wedding guest blink twice. I'd been sitting on it, debating for weeks what to do with it. At first, I wanted to be the bigger person. Let Mark figure it out himself. But then the folding chair, the missing name card, the look Lisa gave me like I was gum on her shoe. And my mom, my own mother, not even flinching. That's what made up my mind. I uploaded the audio file to a burner email. Then I created a group message. Not to everyone, just enough to start a ripple. Mark, a few of his groomsmen, Amanda, Sarah, a handful of Lisa's cousins who looked uncomfortable every time she spoke, and one particular recipient who would be the real accelerant, Lisa's ex-boyfriend, who, fun fact, she'd met up with just 6 weeks ago at a girls' trip in Vegas. I included a short note. Since I wasn't invited to speak at the reception, I figured I'd share my toast here. Congrats. I hit send. Closed the app. Then I drove home. The next morning, I woke up to 12 missed calls, 38 text messages, and a voicemail from my mom that started with, "What did you do?" and ended with, "You better fix this, Alex." I didn't listen to the rest. Instead, I made coffee, opened my laptop, and sat down to read the fallout. The group chat had exploded. Amanda had forwarded the memo to even more people. Someone uploaded it to a wedding gossip subreddit. It was already trending. A screenshot of Lisa's Instagram, where she'd posted best day ever, was being stitched into memes alongside quotes from the memo. My favorite read, "Starter husband fund?" Sounds like a limited time offer. But the real kicker? Mark hadn't posted a single thing. Not a photo. Not a thank you. Not even a married life begins status update. Just radio silence. By noon, Sarah texted me they canceled the post-wedding brunch. Apparently, Lisa locked herself in the hotel bathroom. Mark's at his buddy's house. He looks like he's been hit by a truck. I didn't reply, because I wasn't finished yet. There was one more thing I had up my sleeve. I gave it a day. Not because I was nervous, honestly. I'd never felt calmer, but because the silence was louder than any confrontation I could have staged. No angry text from Mark. No backpedaling apologies from Lisa. Not even a half-hearted, "We need to talk" from Mom. Just this strange vacuum, like everyone was pretending I didn't exist, which, ironically, was how they'd been treating me for years. Only this time, it wasn't on their terms. By the second evening, the cracks were starting to show. Sarah called me. Not a text, a full-on call, which was rare for her. I answered and heard her exhale like she'd been waiting all day to vent. "Okay, you need to know what's happening." "How do you too?" I said, half smiling. "No, seriously," she said. "It's like implosion levels of drama." Apparently, someone had sent the voice memo to Lisa's extended family WhatsApp group. Her aunt, the one who paid for half the wedding flowers, was not amused. Her parents had already been lukewarm about Mark. Now they were embarrassed that their perfect daughter had broadcast her marriage as a financial strategy. Lisa tried to spin it as taken out of context, but the audio had her laughing and saying, "I'll keep him around until the condo finishes construction. Then it's whatever. He's sweet, but I'm not building a future with that." Yeah, real charming. Meanwhile, Mark, who had always lived in denial when it came to Lisa's red flags, was reeling. According to Sarah, he hadn't gone home after the wedding. He stayed at his groomsman Ryan's place and had apparently spent most of Monday pacing the living room, phone in hand, muttering things like, "Was it always like this?" and "How did I miss this?" I'll admit, I didn't feel good about him hurting. He's my brother. We weren't close, but still, I didn't want to destroy him. I just wanted him to finally see what I'd seen all along, that Lisa didn't love him, that Mom never really protected me, that I'd been used as a prop, a reliable wallet and background character at best. But I hadn't even gotten to the last part of my plan. See, the spa gift card? I didn't cancel it. I redirected it. A week before the wedding, I transferred it into a reservation under a different name. A woman Lisa worked with, someone she hated. Her co-worker Jasmine, the one Lisa had once called a try-hard social climber who always wears knockoff bags. I'd heard the story at a family dinner where Lisa dominated the table, venting about office politics as if everyone else lived under rocks. Jasmine, according to Lisa, had once dared to ask if she could split a group lunch bill with her. So when I called the spa and changed the recipient name to Jasmine W. plus guest, I knew what I was doing. Lisa would have no idea until she called to schedule the appointment, which, according to Sarah, happened the morning after the brunch was canceled. Lisa: "Hi. Yes, I'd like to confirm a reservation for a couple's massage. It's under. Wait. What do you mean it's already been claimed? Who's Jasmine? Are you kidding me?" I could practically hear the glass shattering on the other end. That little twist? That wasn't revenge. That was artistry. Later that evening, Mom finally called. I let it ring twice before picking up. Her voice was sharp, tight with embarrassment. "You had no right to sabotage your brother's wedding like that." I leaned back in my chair. Didn't realize I was invited to it. "Don't be clever, Alex." I wasn't trying to be. Just accurate. She sighed like she always did when I wasn't playing along. "You don't know what it's like to hold a family together." "No," I said quietly, "because I've spent my whole life being told I'm not really part of it." She paused. I could hear the static of her silence stretching between us. "You made a scene," she said finally. "No," I replied. "You made a scene when you watched me sit alone by the fire exit and didn't say a word. I just turned on the lights." I hung up before she could answer. Later that week, Sarah sent me a screenshot of Lisa's Instagram. The wedding photos were gone. Every single one. Her account was suddenly full of beach quotes, yoga poses, and vague captions like "healing isn't linear" and "sometimes growth means letting go." Mark's account, on the other hand, hadn't been touched. Still radio silence. But I wasn't done watching. Because while the fallout had started publicly, the real unraveling was still happening behind closed doors. Mark had decisions to make. Lisa had explanations to give. And Mom, well, she was going to have to sit with the discomfort of a son who finally said no. But none of them knew the last part of what I'd set in motion. Not yet. Because Lisa's ex-boyfriend? The one she saw in Vegas? Yeah, he messaged me. Turns out he had his own receipts. Photos. Flight stubs. A hotel confirmation email with Lisa's name and his, dated for the exact weekend she told Mark she was reconnecting with her bridesmaids. And I had a feeling Mark would want to see them. But not in a vindictive way. Not anymore. Because sometimes, the best kind of revenge isn't loud. It isn't cruel. It's just the truth shown at the right time, in the right way. And now that the wedding lights had dimmed, the music faded, and the rented fairy tale turned back into dust, it was finally the right time. I waited exactly one more week. Not because I was stalling, but because some things need time to sink in. And Mark? He wasn't someone who could process betrayal overnight. He was the kind of guy who needed space, quiet, and a push. I knew my brother. He lived his life believing in the best-case scenario. The fairy tale. The glossy surface. That if you smiled for the photos and said the right things, the rest would figure itself out. But this wasn't something he could ignore. Not when every word in that voice memo played like a warning he never heard until it was too late. Not when the person he married, who had sworn to love him, was outed as someone who laughed about him behind closed doors. And not when the people who stood by and watched it happen finally stopped protecting the illusion. On a rainy Thursday morning, Mark texted me. It was short. "Need to talk. Can I come over? I stared at the screen for a second before replying, yeah, anytime. When he showed up, he looked like a man who'd run a marathon without ever realizing he'd started one. Drenched, pale, with bags under his eyes and a crumpled hoodie that didn't match the crisp, curated version of him Lisa used to polish like a trophy. He stepped into my apartment without a word, didn't take off his shoes, didn't sit. He just stood there, dripping. I didn't know, he said quietly. I know. He rubbed the back of his neck like he used to when we were kids and got caught sneaking out. It's not an excuse. I didn't want to know. I nodded. That's how you kept surviving. He sat down on the edge of my couch like it might disappear under him. I listened to the whole recording 5 times. Then I looked through our messages. Read some of the stuff you sent over the years. Things I brushed off. Dismissed. He paused, then looked at me. You were always the only one telling the truth. I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because the weight of those words finally meant something. For the first time in maybe a decade, my brother saw me. Not as a backup. Not as a guest in his perfect life. But as a person. His brother. The one he forgot to fight for. She said I embarrassed her, he muttered. That I wasn't ambitious enough to match her image. That she only went through with the wedding because she didn't want to start over. He laughed, but it wasn't funny. She said all that before we even said, I do. He fell silent, then asked, was I really that blind? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. You weren't blind, Mark. You were just scared of what you'd see. He sat there for a long time, then finally looked up. I called a lawyer. I raised an eyebrow. She was smart, he continued. She didn't put her name on my condo, but she did set up some shared accounts. One of her bridesmaids told me she planned to drain it slowly over a few months. I had them frozen. Lawyers drawing up an annulment. I blinked. That fast? He smiled grimly. Turns out it's easier when the marriage is barely legal and the proof of fraud is overwhelming. There was a pause. Then he asked the question I didn't expect. Why did you wait so long to do anything? I looked him straight in the eye. Because I wanted you to figure it out yourself. He nodded slowly. But you didn't wait forever. No, I said. Because eventually, you crossed a line. Or maybe she did. Maybe Mom did. I don't know. All I know is when I sat down in that folding chair by the fire exit, something snapped. And I realized I'd been giving pieces of myself to people who wouldn't even give me a seat at the table. Mark winced, and I could see the shame creeping into his expression. I'm sorry, Alex, he said, voice cracking. For that. For all of it. For letting her treat you like that. For letting me treat you like that. I didn't say it's okay. Because it wasn't. But I did say thanks. And for us? That was enough. We sat in silence for a while. The rain tapped against the windows like it had something to say but couldn't find the words either. Mark eventually stood, wiping his face with his sleeve. She's moving out of the apartment tomorrow, he said. Didn't even fight it. Just asked if she could keep the espresso machine. I laughed. Let her. She's going to need all the caffeine she can get if she wants to start over with nothing but Instagram quotes and her pride. He cracked a real smile at that. Before he left, he turned at the door. You know, I don't think I ever told you how much Dad trusted you. I raised an eyebrow. He told me once, Mark continued, that if anything ever happened to him, you'd be the one who kept this family honest. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Too bad no one listened, I said. We're listening now, Mark replied. When the door closed behind him, I exhaled deeply. Not out of relief, exactly, but because the years of being overlooked, dismissed, and treated like furniture at my own family's events had finally been acknowledged. Not fixed, not undone, but seen. 3 days later, Mom called again. This time, she didn't scold me. She didn't defend Lisa. She didn't even ask me to apologize. She asked if I wanted to come over for dinner. Just the two of us. I almost said no. But something told me this wasn't about obligation. It wasn't about smoothing things over for show. It was maybe her way of realizing how much she'd ignored the son who never demanded attention but always showed up anyway. So I said yes. Not to make peace, but to set new terms. At dinner, she didn't bring up Lisa, or the wedding, or even the voice memo. She just said, I'm sorry I didn't notice. I looked at her for a long time, then said, I noticed you didn't. And she nodded. That was the start of something better. Mark filed for annulment 2 weeks later. Lisa didn't contest it. The fallout on social media was glorious, cryptic posts, deleted comments, and a mysteriously vanished wedding highlight reel. Her starter husband fund dried up faster than she could refresh her browser, and within a month, she was back living with her parents, applying for brand deals that didn't exist. I sent her a final gift, a tiny, folding chair, with a note, "Only real family gets a real table. Wishing you all the best." She blocked me, obviously, but I wasn't looking for closure from her. The closure came in the form of a quiet Sunday brunch, just me, Mark, and Sarah at a cafe downtown. We laughed about the voice memo, caught up on life, and most importantly, talked like actual equals. Like family. The kind that sees you. The kind that saves you a seat. And not by the fire exit. This time, I sat at the center. And it finally felt like I belonged there. I never thought one sentence could cut so deep. Not until I stood in the hallway of my own home, watching a 17-year-old girl I helped raise glare up at me like I was nothing. "You're not my real dad. You're just some guy," she spat, the words bouncing off the walls like bullets. "My name's Martin. I'm 45, and for the past 12 years, I've done everything I could to be a father to that girl." And yet, in the blink of an eye, she reduced it all. Every bedtime story, every scraped knee I patched, every school recital I showed up to with flowers in hand, to absolutely nothing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, before the disrespect, before the bitterness took root. Maybe then you'll understand why this whole thing still gnaws at me when I'm lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I did wrong. I met Rachel, my wife, when I was 32. She had this dry, sarcastic wit and a laugh that came out in bursts, like she was surprised by her own happiness. She was also a single mom. Her daughter, Haley, was 5 at the time, big brown eyes, gap-toothed grin, and a mop of curly hair that refused to be tamed. I won't pretend I stepped into fatherhood overnight. In fact, Haley barely spoke to me the first 6 months Rachel and I dated. But I was patient. I didn't try to win her over with toys or empty praise. I just showed up, over and over again, helping with math homework, picking her up from daycare when Rachel worked late, learning how to braid her hair, badly, at first. Slowly, she let me in. When Rachel and I got married 2 years later, Haley walked down the aisle tossing petals in front of her mom, beaming like it was her wedding too. And I'll never forget what she whispered when I bent down to hug her afterward. "Can I call you Dad now?" My heart damn near exploded in my chest. For years, things were good. Not perfect, but good. We weren't some fairy tale, and there were bumps, especially when Haley would ask about her biological father, Greg. That was always a touchy subject. From what I knew, Greg had checked out before Haley could walk. No child support, no birthday calls, not even a card. Rachel told me he moved out of state and started a new family, and that was that. For the most part, Haley didn't ask much. But as she got older, maybe around 12 or 13, the questions got more pointed. Why doesn't he want to see me? Did he love me when I was a baby? Do you think he even remembers me? I tried to answer gently, never speaking ill of him, just telling her that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and can't fix them. But part of me always wondered what she carried around, what silent hope she might still have that one day he'd show up out of nowhere and be the dad she never knew. Still, she called me Dad. She made me Father's Day cards. She made fun of my dad jokes, rolled her eyes at my lectures about curfews and safe driving, and came to me when her first boyfriend dumped her over text. I thought we had something solid, something real. That's why I didn't see it coming. It started subtly, like a slow leak in a pipe. Little things. One day she came home from school and slammed her bedroom door without saying hi. Okay, teenagers are moody. I remember being a jerk at 16 too. Then she stopped asking me for help with her essays, even though I used to proofread every single one. She started calling me Martin instead of Dad whenever she was mad, like it was a weapon she could draw on a whim. But I chalked it up to hormones, to teenage rebellion, to her trying to assert some kind of independence. I didn't want to read too much into it. Rachel noticed it too, but she brushed it off. "It's just a phase," she'd say half-heartedly. "You know how teens are. She'll come around." But there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes when she said it, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. Then one night, about 6 months ago, I overheard her talking on the phone. She didn't know I was outside her door. I'd just gotten back from work, tired and already irritated because she'd left a pile of dishes in the sink after promising to clean them. I was about to knock and remind her when I heard her say it. "No, he's not my real dad. He's just some guy my mom married. Like, he acts like he owns the place just because he pays for everything." I didn't ask for him to raise me. The words hit me like a sucker punch. I backed away from the door slowly, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. I didn't say anything that night. I just sat in the living room with the TV on mute, staring at the screen while Rachel dozed off beside me. I didn't sleep a second. From that point on, things started unraveling faster. Haley grew colder. I'd ask her how her day was, and she'd shrug or say fine, without looking up from her phone. When I brought it up to Rachel, she tried to mediate, but Haley just insisted she was stressed from school or going through a lot. She started mentioning Greg more too, always in vague, nostalgic tones. I wonder what kind of music my real dad likes. Do you think Greg would have let me get a nose piercing? I kept my cool, but inside I was boiling. Not because she was curious about Greg, that was normal, but because it felt like she was trying to erase me. Like 12 years meant nothing now that she realized biology held some kind of magical weight. Then came the day of her high school graduation. Rachel and I sat in the front row, proud as could be. I even choked up when Haley walked across the stage. But when she came down, hugging her friends and taking pictures, she barely acknowledged me. One photo with her mom. None with me. She didn't even say, "Thanks for coming." I spent the whole ride home in silence, my stomach in knots. 2 weeks later, the bomb dropped. Haley came into the kitchen one morning with a pamphlet in hand. "So, I've decided I want to go to Bright Ridge University," she said, all businesslike. "And I need help with tuition." Bright Ridge was a private college 3 states away. Tuition ran close to $60,000 a year. My eyebrows shot up. "That's a great school," I said carefully. "But it's expensive. Have you looked into scholarships or financial aid?" She nodded. "Yeah, but I still need help covering the rest." "I figured you could help. You said you had money saved for me." I did. Rachel and I had a joint college fund we'd built over the years, mostly from my salary. I'd always assumed it would go to Haley, no questions asked. But now, sitting there, I felt something twist in my gut. Before I could respond, she added, almost casually, "I mean, you raised me. It's kind of your responsibility, right?" I stared at her. "Kind of my responsibility?" She blinked at me, confused by the tone in my voice. I leaned forward. "Haley, I need to ask you something. Do you see me as your dad?" She hesitated. "Well, technically no, but..." "No," I repeated. "You don't. You've made that clear. So why are you asking me to pay for your college?" She looked annoyed. "Because you've always provided for me. That's what you do." I shook my head, laughing under my breath in disbelief. "Right? I do. I have. Even when you told your friends I was just some guy. Even when you started calling me Martin like I was your mom's ex-boyfriend instead of the man who raised you." Her face hardened. "This isn't about that. I was mad. I didn't mean it. But you said it. And you meant it enough times for it to matter." That's when Rachel walked in and asked what was going on. Haley didn't even wait for me to explain. She turned to her mom and said, "Martin doesn't want to help me with college. He said I should ask Greg." And that's exactly what I told her. Because maybe it was time Greg finally got to be the dad she thought he could be. Rachel's face went pale. Haley stormed out. And that was the beginning of something I couldn't undo. Rachel didn't say much that night. After the explosion in the kitchen, Haley had slammed the door to her room and cranked her music up so loud the bass rattled the cabinet doors. Rachel and I stood there, staring at each other across the breakfast bar, neither of us knowing what to say. I was still breathing hard. My heart wasn't just pounding from anger. It was from the weight of years crashing down at once. I had no idea how much I'd been holding in until that moment. And now that the dam had cracked, there was no patching it back up. "I think you were a little harsh," Rachel finally muttered, barely meeting my eyes. That was the spark. The final insult. I could have handled Haley's teenage delusions. I could have swallowed the disrespect, the name-calling, the revisionist history she was building in her mind where Greg was some hero and I was a glorified ATM. But what cut deeper than anything was Rachel standing there, watching me bleed emotionally, and offering me nothing but a passive shrug. "Harsh," I asked, my voice low and slow. "Rachel, I've been over backwards for that girl since she was 5. I've sacrificed raises, vacations, sleep, sanity, everything. I put my entire life on pause to give her stability, and she stood there and basically told me I'm nothing. And you think I'm the one who's being harsh." Rachel sighed and rubbed her forehead. "She's confused, Martin. You know how teenagers are. She's trying to figure out her identity, where she comes from." This Greg thing. She's 17, I cut in. Not 7. If she's old enough to apply to college, she's old enough to be held accountable for what she says. I'm tired of being the emotional punching bag in this house. Rachel looked away, like she couldn't stand the sight of me. Or maybe it was guilt. I couldn't tell anymore. That night, I slept in the guest room. Not because we fought, but because I didn't want to be near someone who looked at my pain and saw inconvenience instead of injury. Over the next few weeks, the tension grew so thick you could practically chew it. Haley barely spoke to me. When she did, it was only when Rachel was around, and her tone was performative, like she was auditioning for the role of distant, wounded daughter. Rachel, for her part, walked on eggshells. With Haley, she was tender, careful, overly accommodating. With me, cold, short, like I'd kicked a puppy instead of finally standing up for myself. What made it worse was how Haley started playing the victim. She told extended family, Rachel's sister, her parents, even some of our neighbors, that I had refused to support her dreams, that I was punishing her for being curious about her real dad, that I threatened to cut her off just because she was trying to find herself. The worst part? People bought it. I got cold shoulders at Rachel's niece's birthday party. One of her aunts pulled me aside and whispered, "You know, Martin, just because she's not yours by blood doesn't mean you get to give up on her." Give up on her? I wanted to scream. I never gave up. I was pushed out. Then, just when I thought I couldn't feel more alien in my own house, I walked into the living room one afternoon and saw Haley sitting on the couch on a video call with Greg. My stomach dropped. She had her legs tucked under her, face glowing with excitement. "Yeah, I'm thinking of majoring in psychology," she said, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. "I know, right? You always said I was good at reading people." I stood frozen for a second, just long enough for her to glance up and lock eyes with me. Her smile faded. She didn't say anything, didn't introduce me, didn't even flinch. She just angled the camera away slightly, so I wouldn't be in frame, and kept talking. I turned around and walked right back out. Later that night, I asked Rachel when Greg had come back into the picture. "He messaged her on Facebook a few months ago," she admitted. She told me not to say anything yet. She wasn't ready. "You weren't going to tell me?" I asked, stunned. "She's a young adult. It's her choice," Rachel replied defensively. I didn't think it was my place to intervene. I laughed. Actually laughed, because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You mean to tell me that the man who walked out on her is allowed to waltz back into her life unannounced, and I'm just supposed to smile and nod while she pretends I don't exist?" "She's building a relationship," Rachel said. "It doesn't mean she doesn't appreciate you." "She doesn't even like me anymore," I said. "She looks at me like I'm in the way. And you're enabling this. You let her sneak behind my back to reconnect with a deadbeat, and now you're pretending like I'm the one making it complicated?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." The silence that followed was worse than shouting, because silence meant neither of us had anything left to fight for. The real breaking point came 2 weeks later. Rachel and I had started therapy. It wasn't going great. I could tell she was checked out, going through the motions. But I figured if we just held on through the summer, maybe, just maybe, we could get back to what we had. Then one afternoon, I came home early from work. The house was quiet, which was unusual. No music, no clinking of dishes, no TV blaring. I walked in, dropped my keys, and noticed Haley's laptop open on the dining room table. Curious, I peeked at the screen. It was a tuition invoice. Bright Ridge University. Full balance due. Below that, a partially drafted email. "Hi Dad, just wanted to check if the wire transfer went through. Let me know if you need the routing number again. Mom said Martin might try to stop it, so let's keep this between us for now. Love, Haley." I stared at the screen for a full minute before my hands even moved. My palms were sweating. My heart was thudding like a drum. They went behind my back. They bypassed me completely. And they used money from the account Rachel and I built together. My income. The savings I started putting away when Haley was still in elementary school and wanted to be an astronaut. I walked straight into our bedroom and opened the drawer where we kept the joint savings info. Empty. I checked the closet. My old safe was gone too. When Rachel got home that night, I didn't even let her take off her coat. "Where's the college fund money?" I asked, my voice sharp but calm. Too calm. She froze. "What? Don't play dumb, Rachel. Where is it?" Because I saw Haley's email. "She's asking Greg if the transfer went through." "My money. Our money." She looked pale. "Guilty. but not surprised. I moved it, she said finally, to a different account. Why? Because you made it clear you weren't going to help her. I made it clear I wasn't going to be manipulated by someone who treats me like trash. That doesn't mean you get to steal from me. It's not stealing. She's our daughter. She's your daughter. And you made that pretty damn clear. Her lip trembled. I just wanted her to have a chance. I didn't want this stupid pride war to ruin her future. I stepped back like I'd been hit. This isn't about pride. It's about betrayal. From both of you. Neither of us slept that night. I called the bank the next morning and learned that yes, Rachel had drained the account 2 days prior. Without my consent. She'd been listed as a joint account holder, so technically, it was legal. But morally? It felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out 12 years of fatherhood, memories and all. I didn't confront Haley right away. I wanted to. God, I wanted to storm into her room and let her have it. But I didn't. Because deep down, some broken part of me still hoped she'd come to her senses. Still hoped she'd look at me and remember all those nights I stayed up with her during fevers, all the scraped knees, all the late-night runs for poster board the night before science fairs. Instead, she doubled down. A few days later, I heard her on the phone again. Yeah, it's done. Mom took care of it. No, he's still mad. But who cares? Honestly, I'm glad he showed his true colors before I left for school. Now I don't have to feel guilty cutting him off. That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped so quietly, so permanently, that I didn't even feel anger anymore. I felt resolve. Cold, steady resolve. If they wanted to rewrite history, fine. But I still had a few pages left to write. And I was going to make sure they read every single one. You ever sit in a quiet house and feel like the silence is mocking you? That was me for weeks. Rachel and Haley were still living under the same roof, but it felt like I'd already moved out emotionally. We passed each other like strangers in an airport, polite, wordless, distant. The kind of silence that carries weight. That says more in what's not spoken than a full-blown screaming match ever could. I started sleeping in the guest room permanently. It was a small, stuffy space that doubled as Rachel's old home office, with a creaky futon and a single lamp that buzzed when it got too warm. I didn't care. It felt more honest. The main bedroom still smelled like her lotion and the citrus shampoo she used, and I couldn't stand being surrounded by that kind of history anymore. It wasn't home. It was a museum of what used to be. Haley didn't speak to me at all. No hi. No bye, nothing. She'd breeze in and out of the house like a ghost that only Rachel could see. The only evidence of her presence was the occasional thud of a suitcase or the sound of her talking on speakerphone to Greg, laughing like he was the best thing that had ever happened to her. Like he hadn't left her behind when she was still in diapers. Like he hadn't watched her grow up from the distance of complete indifference. I tried to drown it all out. Focus on work. On my clients. On tasks I could control. But even there, I started slipping. I'm an architect by trade. I design residential homes for a mid-sized firm. Not glamorous, but I'm proud of the work I do. Or I used to be. I'd always been the guy who stayed late tweaking renderings, refining beams, obsessing over measurements. But now, I'd stare at my screen for 20 minutes, caught in a loop of thinking about that tuition email, or the way Rachel looked away when she lied to my face, or Haley's voice, cold and dismissive, telling Greg she was glad she didn't have to feel guilty about cutting me off. I got called into my manager's office 2 weeks later. Martin, he said gently, I'm going to be real with you. You're off. You're distracted. And the Carmichael project? It's late and sloppy. That's not like you. I didn't make excuses. I just nodded and apologized. But as I left his office, something inside me started whispering, you've got nothing left to lose, man. At first, I tried to ignore that voice. I thought maybe if I just waited it out, something would change. Maybe Haley would come to her senses. Maybe Rachel would apologize. Maybe Greg would mess up again and the illusion would shatter. But none of that happened. In fact, it got worse. I came home one night and the dining table was set for 3. Candles lit. Plates stacked. Real silverware, not the usual mismatched forks. I stood there for a second, confused, until I heard his voice. Greg, in my house, laughing. I walked in slowly, like I was in a dream. He was sitting in my chair at the head of the table, wearing some smug blue button-up, chatting with Rachel and Haley like this was some sitcom dinner. Haley was glowing. Rachel looked tense, but not surprised. Like she'd been expecting this moment and had rehearsed it. I didn't say a word, just turned around and left. I drove to a nearby park and sat in my car until it got dark. Then darker, until the street lamps clicked on and all the joggers went home and the only sound was the wind whispering through the trees. That night, I made a decision. I was done waiting for apologies that weren't coming. Done living in the shell of a life I'd built for a family that didn't see me anymore. I started small. First, I went to the bank and opened a new account, solo, under my name only. Then I set up a private P.O. box and started forwarding my important mail there. I pulled my personal items from the shared safe Rachel had relocated, and I ordered a new one for the guest room. I began logging receipts, tracking every household expense I paid from that point forward. I wasn't planning revenge yet. Not consciously, but I was drawing lines. Preparing. Next, I sat down and made a list of everything I used to love that I'd abandoned over the past decade. Woodworking. Sketching for fun. Running. I signed up for a woodworking class at a local shop. It was awkward at first. I was the only guy over 40 in the class, surrounded by enthusiastic 20-somethings with TikTok woodworking channels. But when I made my first dovetail joint, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Pride. Pure, unfiltered pride. That piece of wood didn't care if I was a stepdad or not. It just became what I shaped it into. I started running again too. Just a mile at first. Then 2. Then 5. I bought new shoes. Made a playlist. Hit the trail at 6 a.m. like it was a ritual. With every mile, the bitterness burned off. Sweated out of me. Not completely, but enough to start breathing again. I also started drawing, really drawing. Not just blueprints and elevations, but the kind of sketching I used to do in college. Houses, yes, but also people. Scenes. Ideas for places that didn't exist yet. I filled 3 sketchbooks in 2 months. And slowly, my confidence came back. At work, I turned the Carmichael project around. Finished ahead of the new deadline. Got a quiet nod of approval from my manager. I started packing meals for myself. Planning weekend hikes. Reading again, something other than emails and invoices. Rachel barely noticed. Or if she did, she didn't say anything. She was too wrapped up in playing family again with Greg. He started coming around more often, fixing leaky sinks, replacing light bulbs I used to change. I never confronted him, never gave him the satisfaction. I just took notes, mental ones. Dates, times, who paid for what. I was documenting everything now. Then one day, I came home to find Rachel in the kitchen, holding a manila envelope. "I need you to sign this," she said without looking up. "What is it?" She pushed it across the counter. "Authorization for Haley's student housing and emergency contact info. Since you're not covering tuition, they need it signed by a parent." I stared at her. "A parent?" I asked slowly. "Or the dad she likes this month?" Rachel sighed. "Martin, don't do this. Please." I didn't move. "You moved the money. You lied to my face. You let the guy who abandoned his own daughter back into her life without telling me. And now you want my signature so you can pretend we're still co-parents?" She didn't say anything, just stood there, waiting. I didn't sign. Instead, I said 6 words that changed everything. "I want a separation." Effective immediately. Rachel froze. Her lips parted like she'd misheard me. "What?" "I'll be civil. I won't make a scene. But I want out. And I want it now." Her face shifted, shock, then fear, then something cold and calculating. "You're overreacting." "Maybe," I said. "But that doesn't mean I'm wrong." The next day, I met with a lawyer. She was sharp, professional, and kind in a no-nonsense sort of way. After I laid out the entire situation, she just nodded and said, "You're not the first step-parent to get pushed out when the biology card gets played. But that doesn't mean you don't have rights, especially if you've contributed financially and emotionally for over a decade." We talked strategy. She advised me to collect all records of financial contributions, including household bills, school payments, medical expenses, anything that proved I'd been an equal partner in raising Haley. I already had half of it in my new safe. By the end of the meeting, I felt something unfamiliar. Hope. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. But I wanted fairness. I wanted peace. And most of all, I wanted my life back. A few weeks after filing for separation, I moved into a rental townhouse about 15 minutes away. It wasn't fancy, small, quiet, with an old maple tree in the front yard and just enough space to build a little workshop in the garage. But it was mine. The first night I slept there, I didn't dream. I just lay in bed, arms folded behind my head, listening to the silence. not the tense, suffocating silence of my old house. This silence was clean, empty, free. A week later, Haley sent me a text. It was the first time she'd contacted me in over 2 months. "I heard you moved out. Guess I was right. You never really wanted to be part of this family." I didn't reply, because I was finally starting to realize something important. You can love someone with everything you have, and still walk away when they start using that love as a weapon. The day I moved into that little townhouse, something clicked inside me, not like a switch being flipped, but like a weight finally being lifted. The kind you carry for so long, you forget what it feels like to stand straight. I unpacked slowly, methodically. Every item I chose to bring felt like a line in the sand. If it came with me, it had value. If not, it stayed behind. Rachel's photos? Gone. Haley's Father's Day cards? I kept those, but sealed them in a box and shoved them deep into a closet, like a wound I wasn't ready to look at yet. And then, I started plotting. I didn't call it revenge, not at first. It felt more like setting the record straight. Reclaiming what I'd given and what had been quietly stolen from me, both emotionally and financially. But deep down I knew, this wasn't just about justice. It was about closure. It was about building something so clean and sharp that when the time came, Rachel and Haley would have no choice but to look back and realize exactly what they'd thrown away. The first thing I did was contact my lawyer again. "You ready for the next steps?" she asked, flipping open her tablet during our meeting at her office. "Absolutely," I said, with a calm I hadn't felt in months. We reviewed everything. I showed her records, bank statements, tuition payments, birthday expenses, the logs I'd been keeping since the fallout began. I handed her printouts of text messages, receipts, even screenshots of Haley's email to Greg about the wire transfer. I was building a paper trail so airtight you could vacuum seal it. "Are you interested in pursuing any repayment for the college fund?" she asked. "Eventually," I said. "But for now, I want to focus on the separation assets. I want what's mine. Nothing more." We filed for asset division under separation terms, and since Rachel and I weren't officially divorced yet, and she'd drained the account after I'd voiced my objection to covering Haley's tuition, there was a strong argument that she'd mishandled joint funds. Now, here's where it gets interesting. During our initial years of marriage, I'd bought the house we lived in. Technically, it was in both our names, but the down payment came solely from my savings, years before I even met Rachel. We refinanced once after we got married, but I kept a copy of the original purchase documents and all my solo payment receipts from before we tied the knot. When I brought this up to my lawyer, her eyes lit up. "That's leverage," she said. "A judge will take note that you brought the majority of the equity into that property." I nodded. "Good. Because that house means nothing to me now. But it's the principle." She leaned back in her chair, one brow raised. "You sure this isn't about getting even?" "It's about making sure they know they didn't win," I replied. "Not really." From there, I got to work laying my chessboard. I started reaching out to people I'd distanced myself from during my years of trying to be the perfect stepdad. Old friends, co-workers, my cousin Derek, who used to be like a brother until Rachel decided he was immature and not the kind of influence Haley needed around. One by one, I reconnected, grabbed coffee, went to barbecues, rebuilt the network I'd sacrificed in favor of a family that never truly saw me. At one of those barbecues, something unexpected happened. I met Natalie. She wasn't a date. Not at first. She was Derek's friend from work, a freelance illustrator who showed up with a bottle of sangria and zero small talk. She was sharp, funny, and had this way of looking at you that made you feel like she'd already figured out the part of yourself you were trying to hide. We talked for almost 2 hours straight under a string of backyard lights while everyone else drank and played cornhole. At the end of the night, she asked, "You always look this serious? Or is this just the post-divorce glow?" I laughed for real. The first genuine laugh I'd had in what felt like years. "Still figuring that out?" I said. We started texting, then grabbing coffee, then dinner. I wasn't ready to call it anything serious, and neither was she, but it felt good. Like discovering a new part of myself I didn't know existed. Meanwhile, back in the house I used to call home, things weren't going quite as smoothly. Greg had apparently started overstaying his welcome. Haley, thrilled to have her real dad back, had invited him to help her shop for dorm supplies. Then she asked if he could help her move into her dorm room. Then, according to what Rachel eventually admitted in a desperate email, he asked if he could stay in the house a few days a week when he was in town. I didn't reply to her email, but I sure did forward it to my lawyer. Another brick for the wall, she said. Then came a real gift, a message from Rachel's former coworker, Janet. She'd always liked me, called me the grown-up version of a Labrador. Her words, not mine. She messaged me on Facebook one evening. Hey, I heard about everything. I don't want to stir the pot, but I thought you should know. Greg's been bragging to people that Rachel's letting him stay over again. Like, overnight. Multiple times. I'm sorry. That was golden. You see, when we filed for separation, one of the stipulations we agreed to was that neither of us would bring a romantic partner to live in the shared home during the separation process. Rachel had insisted on it, probably assuming I'd move on first. So when I sent that message to my lawyer, her response was swift. Violation of agreement. Let's use it. We filed a motion requesting expedited financial review of the home assets and petitioned for primary control of the house based on Rachel's breach. It wouldn't necessarily mean I'd move back in, but it meant leverage. It meant potential buyout. And it meant Rachel's version of events was beginning to unravel in a court-recorded way. While the paperwork churned through the system, I made one more strategic move. Remember Haley's college fund? The one they stole from our joint account. I couldn't get it back, not directly, but I did find a loophole. See, I'd started a Roth IRA years ago under my name with additional college savings set aside. It was never merged with our other funds. Quietly, over the years, I'd continued contributing to it, even after Haley grew distant. Call it hope, or denial, that account, untouchable by Rachel. And I changed the beneficiary, not to spite Haley, but to protect myself. Then, I created a trust, just a simple one, for now. But it had room to grow. And in that trust, I named 2 people as contingent beneficiaries. My godson Miles, Derek's kid, sharp as a whip and wants to be an engineer, and my niece Allison, who I'd barely seen since Rachel started icing out my side of the family. The message was clear. I wasn't done giving. I was just done giving to people who saw me as disposable. Meanwhile, Haley? She sent me one last message before leaving for Brightridge. You really showed your true colors, Martin. You'll regret this. I didn't reply, but inside I smiled, because I knew something she didn't. See, I called Brightridge a few weeks prior, not to block her enrollment, but to ask a simple question as the former financial contributor. What's the policy on tuition disputes or transfers if the funding source changes? Turns out, schools get very uncomfortable when they find out the source of tuition funds is under legal review. They don't like messy financials. I didn't pull the plug. I didn't need to. I just nudged the lever. And the next week, I heard from an old contact, someone who worked in the admissions office at Brightridge. Not close enough to break privacy rules, but close enough to offer me a tidbit during lunch. Funny thing, someone's dad made a lot of promises he couldn't keep. The kid's financial clearance is under review now. That was the moment I knew. They'd overplayed their hand. Rachel and Greg had spent months building a fantasy out of biology and betrayal. But I was done playing defense. I was drawing up blueprints now for something better, something permanent. The only question left was when to let the hammer fall. It all came together on a Thursday. Not a dramatic day, no thunderstorms, no ominous music, just a crisp, cool afternoon in early fall, the kind of day where the air smells clean, like fresh starts and freshly raked leaves. It was fitting, honestly, quiet, controlled, exactly how I wanted it. The revenge wasn't about explosions. It wasn't about shouting or name-calling or viral Facebook posts. It was about precision, about watching a tower fall slowly, brick by brick, until the people who built it realized it had no foundation. Let's start with the house. After months of legal back and forth, Rachel and I ended up in mediation to settle the division of assets. She showed up in a beige blazer that looked like she picked it out just to seem professional, sitting stiff in the chair across from me. Her lawyer, a guy with all the charisma of a soggy napkin, tried to argue that the house should remain hers for the sake of continuity and because Martin has already established new residents elsewhere. What he didn't expect was the mountain of documentation I'd brought showing that I was the one who purchased the home, made 85% of the mortgage payments over the years, paid for all renovations, and, here's the kicker, continued to contribute financially even after I'd moved out. Then came the violation of our agreement. The emails, the witness statements, the neighbor's testimony. She saw Greg's car parked overnight multiple times. I didn't have to exaggerate. I just told the truth, slowly and methodically, while her lawyer's face turned redder by the minute. By the end of the session, Rachel offered to sell her share to me in exchange for waiving any claim to my retirement account. I agreed. On one condition. I wanted in writing that neither Rachel nor Greg can reside in the property or use the address for any legal or financial purpose moving forward. She balked. That's unnecessary. I just looked at her, calm and unmoved. Then I walk away. I let the court decide, and I guarantee it won't end in your favor. She signed. A week later, I put the house up for sale. I didn't want it. Not really. Too many ghosts in the walls. But selling it was symbolic. A statement. I got multiple offers within 3 days. By the end of the month, it was sold. The profits? Mine. Not because I was vindictive, because I was smart. And because I finally played the game the way they had been playing it all along. Cold, calculated, and without apology. Now let's talk about Haley. Her tuition nightmare unraveled faster than I expected. You see, when Rachel transferred the funds to Greg to pay Haley's tuition, they never considered how universities vet financial contributions, especially when legal disputes arise. Once Bright Ridge flagged the source of her payment as potentially illegitimate, it triggered a review of her financial aid package. Greg, of course, hadn't actually paid yet. He'd promised to wire it, then delayed. Probably thought he had more time. But when the financial office reached out for confirmation and couldn't get a clear answer, they froze Haley's enrollment. She showed up at my townhouse 2 weeks later. First time in months. I opened the door and just stood there, arms crossed. Her eyes were puffy. She hadn't slept. "Can I come in?" she asked, voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I stepped aside, not out of warmth, out of curiosity. She stood in the living room, looking around like she didn't recognize the place. Like she couldn't believe I'd built something without her. They dropped me from my dorm, she said quietly, until the payment clears. But Greg said he sent it, and the school says they never got it. I didn't say anything. She took a breath. "I was wondering if you could maybe call them? Tell them it's being handled." I raised an eyebrow. Why would I do that? Her eyes welled up. "Because I need this. And I know I've been awful to you. But, no," I said, gently but firmly. "You weren't just awful. You erased me. You made a choice. You told people I wasn't your dad. You told Greg I was just some guy. And then you and your mother took money that didn't belong to you." She didn't deny it. She just looked down at her shoes. I leaned against the kitchen counter. "I'm not here to rescue you anymore. That chapter's over. You wanted your real dad? This is the part where he steps up." She didn't cry. Not exactly. But her mouth trembled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And for the first time, I believed her. But that didn't mean I was going to fix it. "I hope you figure things out," I said. "Really. But I'm not your safety net anymore." She left without saying another word. And you know what? I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't gloat. I felt clean, like I'd finally stopped bleeding. Now, here's the part no one saw coming. Greg? He ghosted. After promising to pay Haley's tuition, he suddenly became unreachable. Rachel called, texted, emailed. Nothing. Turns out, he'd been using someone else's address to dodge back child support from another state. And when his name got tied up in the financial aid investigation at Bright Ridge, it triggered a deeper look into his finances. That's when everything blew up. Turns out, Greg owed close to $48,000 in unpaid support to another family. And thanks to the paper trail I helped trigger, accidentally or not, the state reactivated his case. He disappeared. Again. Classic. Rachel tried to hold it together, but the cracks were showing. Her emails turned frantic, then bitter, then silent. The final one she sent me simply said, "I hope you're happy. You've poisoned our family." I didn't reply, because I hadn't poisoned anything. I just stopped drinking the Kool-Aid. In the months that followed, I flourished. I finished my woodworking course and turned my garage into a full workshop. Started making custom pieces, coffee tables, benches, decorative shelving. People at work started placing orders. I wasn't looking to start a business, but it felt good to build something with my hands again. Natalie and I kept things simple. We saw each other once a week, then twice, then almost every weekend. She never asked too much, never rushed me, just existed with me in a space that felt light, free. My townhouse became a sanctuary. Warm lighting, clean wood, no ghosts, no passive aggression, no slammed doors. And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. One day, I got a letter in the mail. From Haley. Handwritten. She told me she'd gotten a part-time job, that she was trying to re-enroll for the spring semester, that she was staying with a friend and figuring things out on her own. She apologized again, this time without expectations. She ended it with, "I know I broke something between us, maybe forever, but I just wanted to say thank you for being there, even when I didn't see it. I don't expect anything. I just hope you're doing okay." I didn't write back, not because I hated her, but because I finally understood something. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. I placed the letter in the same box as her old drawings and Father's Day cards. I closed the lid, tucked it away. Then I went outside, into the cool afternoon air, and watched the wind move through the trees. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It just arrives. And when it does, you know it. Like I did that day, when I stood on my porch, exhaling years of betrayal, bitterness, and heartbreak, and whispered to no one in particular. I made it out.